Good morning and welcome to the Melbourne EdTech Summit. I'm David Linke, the Managing Director of EduGrowth. We are Australia's education technology and innovation industry hub. Through connection and collaboration, we are accelerating Australia's EdTech ecosystem globally. The Melbourne EdTech Summit theme is amplifying education innovation, and we look forward to some amazing conversations over the coming days. We've already had some fantastic speakers during the first 2 days, but I think the best is yet to come, and we are lucky to have some speakers sharing their thoughts and insights on the future of education in a digital world. These 80 speakers will be contributing 24 hours of live content over the entire Melbourne EdTech Summit. Tuesday morning, we had a warm welcome to country from Wurundjeri Elder Diane Kerr. I would like to add my acknowledgement to the traditional owners of the land and recognise their continuous and unbroken connection to the land, waters and culture across the country. Today, I'm joining you from the traditional land of the Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. I extend all our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and specifically any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present with us today. A program like the Melbourne EdTech Summit is only possible with the support of many players. I welcome Andrew Abbott, the Acting CEO of our Principal Partners Global Victoria. Andrew has held senior executive positions across the Victorian Public Service, including roles with the Department of Premier and Cabinet, Department of Economic Development, the Department of Jobs Precinct and Regions, the Department of Education, Early Learning, Early Childhood Development, and the Department of Innovation, Industry and Regional Development. Please welcome Andrew. Hi, Andrew. How are you? I can't hear you, Andrew. You might be on mute.
Got it. You'd think...
There we go. We've got you now.
You'd think that we'd all be in the swing of that by now. Yes, look, thank you for that welcome, David. And good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Victorian Government, I'd like to say how pleased we are to be a principal sponsor of the Melbourne EdTech Summit. First, I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands for which we are respectively beaming in and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any other elders who are with us today. It's fantastic to see people dialing in from right around the world for this really exciting program, which is going to explore and celebrate EdTech and education innovation. The pandemic has driven interest and demand for EdTech and innovative learning modules, for which the global market for EdTech is expected to be worth over $340 billion by 2025. This summit provides an invaluable opportunity to bring together Australian EdTech leaders and global innovators to discuss a range of really important issues facing the sector currently and into the future, both challenges and opportunities. Global Victoria, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, trade agency for the Victorian Government. We open the world to Victorian businesses and welcome business world to Victoria. And we do this by building the skills and knowledge of Victorian businesses to grow on the international stage, promoting the state's world-class industry capabilities to international audiences and leading the nation as the best city in Australia to study in. We've got an international network of 23 trade and investment offices, and they're located in key markets in order to open doors to contacts who can support your global ambitions. Positioning Victoria as a world leader in education technology and innovation is a key objective of the Victorian Government. Global Victoria strives to leverage growth in education technology and deliver a range of initiatives to support the sector. These include being principal partners of the EdTech International Conference and Expo and the Melbourne EdTech Summit, helping Victorian companies export through connection with our global education network in key international markets, delivering a suite of virtual trade missions to support Victorian EdTech companies export to key trading markets, and by funding EdTech efficacy research projects in the field. The Global Victoria EdTech Innovation Alliance program is one of two streams of our $3.6 million international research program outlined in the Victorian Government's International Education Short-Term Recovery Plan. The program will be delivered by EduGrowth to connect EdTech companies, researchers and international partners to conduct efficacy research on Victorian EdTech products for export. These are really exciting times for the EdTech industry, and Victoria is booming with growth and opportunities. Melbourne's home to 33% of Australia's EdTech companies. Melbourne is a global thought leader in learning and assessment. It's also the centre of Australia's online learning sector and has a strong reputation for delivering high quality international education. Victorian EdTech companies are well represented in the poll on all Q Australia and New Zealand EdTech 50, an annual list that recognises the most innovative and most promising EdTech startup companies in the region. In this ranking, Melbourne had the largest share of EdTech companies, including businesses focusing on workforce and skills, learning environments, and education management analytics. Over the next couple of days, we're going to hear from industry leaders and experts in EdTech and online learning. Businesses, education providers, tech companies, policymakers coming together to explore innovation in education and ways to maximise the online learning experience, develop new EdTech products and services, and redefine business strategies. It's great to have the opportunity to be here. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks very much, Andrew. We truly do appreciate the partnership with Global Victoria and your kind words and the excitement that we have around the EdTech ecosystem globally and especially coming out of Victoria. Thank you. We'll now hear from Emeritus Professor Beverly Oliver, who will do a warm welcome on behalf of EduGrowth. Beverly is a higher education consultant, speaker, and research focused on digital education, micro-credentials, curriculum transformation, quality assurance, and graduate employability. She's the past Deputy Vice Chancellor Education at Deakin University, where she was awarded the title of Alfred Deakin Professor for her outstanding and sustained contribution, conceptualising the strategic enhancement of courses in the digital economy, whilst furthering Deakin University's research and scholarship in the field of higher education. Beverly is also a non-executive director at EduGrowth and publicly listed EdTech company Open Learning. Thanks for being here, Beverly. I can't hear you either, Beverly. You might be on mute as well. Just hang on one second. I still am having a sound issue. I'll just check with my team in the production whether they can hear you. No, we're not getting sound, Beverly. Do you want to see if you've got microphone connected? If you've pressed the gears icon, you may be able to find an alternative microphone there.
Is that?
I think we got you now.
I'm working?
Yep, we've got you now.
Well, there you are. I hope that gives everyone confidence that, you know, no matter how long you've been in this game, you can always fail. The computer says no. Good morning, David, and good morning, Andrew. I thought I'd try the mute, problem just to make Andrew feel better, but I think I actually exceeded his problem. Sorry.
Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here as well. It's wonderful to see EduGrowth going from strength to strength. I'd also like to add my thoughts on acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. Even if that land is virtual, we are, of course, all in a certain physical place. And I'm coming to you from the lands of the Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And I acknowledge traditional owners and leaders, past, present, and emerging. Well, it's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to have you here. The context of the summit, of course, is to welcome those people also who are joining us from all those educators, entrepreneurs, and policymakers joining us from the precinct of EdTech. It's great to have you here too. And this has been a wonderful few days. I've been joining in, listening in over the last couple of days, and we've got even more things happening. Today, the theme is really around higher education, and it's about amplifying education innovation. And we're really focusing today on visionaries accelerating education. And this is part of the original brief of EduGrowth. And I'm delighted to say that I was in the room when EduGrowth was born, if you like. And I want to pay particular tribute to the EduGrowth team and David in particular, but everyone else who's been part of the EduGrowth story. And really the essence is this, it's quite simple. Look, educators and those of us who've worked in large or small organisations know that there are always issues, challenges and problems, and there's always a way of fixing and future-proofing as well. The trouble is, though, that a lot of the education entrepreneurs were actually over there by themselves, dreaming up bright, shiny ideas to help bring about those solutions, but the two were not necessarily meeting. So EduGrowth was born really to bring all those people together, and that's why its mantra of connect, collaborate and accelerate is really central. So it's about bringing all the parties together, and that includes the policymakers, the entrepreneurs, the investors, the educators, absolutely key, and the EdTech community, of course. So we're hoping that through these years and through fantastic events like this one, that we really can get people to connect, collaborate, and accelerate. So I hope that's working. It's also my great pleasure to reinforce, after watching that high-octane introduction, reinforce the thanks to our great sponsors who make this possible and make it possible for us all to come here for free, which is amazing and fantastic. So I'd like to call out and acknowledge Global Vic, WAND, Amazon Web Services, Curio, and Open Learning. Thank you all to our major and partner sponsors for making this event possible. And I'll hand back to you, David.
Thanks so very much, Beverly. I really appreciate your help. We'll have you back in a few minutes for our first session. We have an amazing program ahead of us today, and we begin with launching an exciting program that EduGrowth is delivering in partnership with Global Victoria. Some highlights of the rest of the program this morning includes Liz Johnson from Deakin and Deanne Ranieri from Northeastern University in Boston. Sherman Young from RMIT in conversation with Chris Fitzpatrick from Studio, before our only session on the impact of the pandemic with Brett Blacker and Jake Foster thinking about the reinvention of an entire education sector. You can see the entire agenda in the top right corner of your screens, and I think you can even select sessions to build your own personal agenda or send you reminders as things go throughout the day. At lunchtime, don't go anywhere. We have lined up 4 special performances across the Melbourne EdTech Summit to provide light entertainment for us all during this lockdown across the country. Earlier in the week, we had a cellist and a duet, and today we have a magician, and tomorrow we've got a light-hearted review of learning from home. We've invited these performers to the Melbourne EdTech Summit because we know some people in our community have struggled during the pandemic, and to that end, EduGrowth has paid each of these performers. But we'll ask you, the audience, to make a small donation to the performers if you can. There'll be a link on the screen in a few moments. You can go and make a donation there, and you can hang around and you can watch these people perform their art in an environment where they haven't been able to. Our first session this morning is quite an exciting one. It's something we've been working on in partnership with the Victorian Government for a long time, and we'll hear from Carolyn Hartnett and Beverly as we launch an exciting project. Carolyn Hartnett is the Deputy Director of International Education at Global Victoria and has worked in policy advisory and analytic roles in relation to the education sector for more than a decade. Welcome, Carolyn.
Hi, David. Lovely to be here.
Thanks very much. And I think we've got Beverly there as well. And I'll hand over to both of you to have a conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David. Hi, Beverly. How are you going?
Good morning, Carolyn. How are you? Very well, thank you.
Good, good. Yep, all good here. So yeah, let's talk about this really exciting program that we're doing, the Global Vic EdTech Innovation Alliance. Andrew mentioned it in his opening remarks. You also talked a little bit about when EduGrowth was being formed, how there was that disconnect in the entrepreneurs and the education providers and trying to create that connection. What is the program?
So, well, you well may ask, Carolyn, because I know you've had a bit to do with it. So we're going to make this a coffee conversation, and
yeah,
I'm really excited to be part of this announcement. And I know that there will be other announcements coming along in due course when things are public, but it's public now. So the Victorian Government has committed $3.6 million to support research partnerships between Victorian and global universities. As part of this program, we've allocated $800,000 to support collaboration between EdTech companies and Victorian Education Institution to pilot new EdTech offerings. So that's really good news. So there are 3 key parts to this.
Yeah.
There's an introductory workshop, there are innovation sprints, and then there's a symposium at the end. So basically, we've got opportunities for 6 particular partners to have 6 months support to embed their EdTech product with a Victorian education partner and get underpinning research to find out how efficacious that project was, or not? What can we learn from it? How can we improve it, and so on? So that's in a bit of a nutshell, but maybe you can add a bit more.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this program being talked about today and to be working on it. I think it's a really great opportunity to actually, bring this. It's a tangible program where we're literally bringing the sectors together to have access to basically do test bed research, really test their products, measure those learning outcomes, with the idea that we can then really support those companies, back them in so that they can then export those products offshore, and really having that evidence base behind them, helping to strengthen the reasoning of why their product is a really good product to have in an education institution. I think will be really powerful, and also benefits the learner as well. So I think it's really valuable in that it's also benefiting the education provider, because they can test these products, see how it works, and the student ultimately is the winner because they get an improved product that actually is better meeting their needs and also helping them achieve those learning outcomes. So I think it's really exciting. It definitely, I know it's something we've talked about for a little while. Do you want to shed a bit of light on how we sort of came about this idea, Beverly, or would you like me to?
Sure. Well, look, I'll start and you can add, Carolyn. How's that? So I'm glad you mentioned that the learner is the winner, because isn't that at the heart of everything we do as educators and the education industry? So really good. But look, this didn't just kind of come up in the last 5 minutes. This started way back in 2018. And what I really like about this is it came from a grassroots effort. So back in 2018, EduGrowth had roundtables, managed and ran roundtables in all major states around Australia, and actually sought from those roundtables, what are the things required to make the EdTech ecosystem really start to hum? And it came out of that there were 6 key steps that we needed. I won't go through them all, maybe you can, but several of them have actually become part of this program, and that is the test bed, the research, the connection, and so on. And it's the most important thing is actually connecting the test beds with the entrepreneurs and the investors as well. So that's a start for me. I'll leave you to have a go.
Yeah, no, it was. I remember being part of those roundtables and it being a really exciting juncture, I think, because it was the first time we'd all really got together in a room, policymakers, education providers, EdTech companies, to really go, okay, well, how do we create this connectivity in the system? And at the time as well, our international education strategy for Victoria at the time had a commitment as well around building Victoria as an EdTech hub. And I was tasked at the time to explore that. What is EdTech? You know, what does it mean for the state? How are we going to leverage this? Is this an opportunity for us? Is there a role for government? And so it was really interesting for me at that time as well, and really exciting to be part of those conversations. And I think through that, we really discovered, there is all this great work that we can do as Victorian government to help connect those different players in the sector and really leverage our strengths as well. Through that, we found all sorts of different great things. So Victoria is actually a home for online program managers. So we have KeyPath here, OUA, OES, Pearson, and now FutureLearn as well. So it's really exciting to have that kind of discovery that Victoria is the home for online learning. We also found out that about a third of EdTech companies of Australia are based here, and they're all really high performing, great exporters. We tend to have more medium scale to large scale companies here as well, which is good for exporting. We also know, being from the international education team, that Victoria is world leading in delivering education, especially internationally. We're ranked as Australia's best student city time and time again. I think in the latest ranking, we were ranked sixth globally. So really great to have those discovery points and think about how can we leverage these different sectors to bring them together to do something like this innovation research. How can we make sure that we remain competitive in the global community to really lift up everyone and put our best foot forward going into the world. So yeah, it was an exciting time.
Well, you raise a really interesting point, Carolyn, and maybe we can talk about that, which is, international education. How post-COVID is this world of ours going to change, and what opportunities are now going to come? Because almost overnight, it feels as though, the whole industry has changed. Well, every industry has changed. The way we shop, the way we talk. Look at us now. We would have been in a room in Melbourne, probably in the CBD a few short years ago, or even a couple of years ago. Now here we are. We're sort of limited because now we're all confined to virtual, but we're actually talking to people from all over the world here right now. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? So maybe we can talk a little bit about where we think international is going to go, because international, digital doesn't really have that many boundaries. I know there are some, and I know there are obstacles, broadband being one, and access and capability of using a device. But, where could EduGrowth go? Where could Global Vic take this, and other jurisdictions as well, now that we've really been forced into the digital world?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting, and something that we talk about a lot is how is the nature of education changing? How is the nature of international education changing? Is it here to stay? What are the different modes that are going to emerge? We've seen a lot of debate, and I think everyone's seen a lot of debate around the online learning question. And look, my view is that online learning is here to stay. The way that it's packaged up in an education course will differ and will be flexible. So it'll be a lot more flexible than what we've had in the past. Students can do some study in market or from their home online, maybe do the first year of their course online from home, and then come to Australia for the second 2 years of their study. Or they might do they'll break it up so it's all different blocks of study, different modes of study, and that kind of more hybrid model, I think, going forward. And really thinking about not just the learning experience, but also the students' wraparound experience as well. So that the digital technologies that help support that student. So we've seen a lot of students, we know a lot of students are struggling mentally. There's a lot of welfare issues going on at the moment. So it's about how do we reach out and support those students through digital means as well? How do we access them and make sure they're okay, and that they're, I guess, in an environment, or as much as we can support and help them be ready for learning as well. So I think there's lots of different opportunity around the different modes. Obviously, I guess for government, we're always very keen to have onshore education coming. So students coming here, it's very important for our their spend on goods and services, as well as very important for our skilled migration pipeline, as well as just the broader amazing benefits that an international community brings to our broader society. It's one of the best things about living in Melbourne. But I think there's so many different market segments that we can now explore as well, that there's people all around the world that we can access and share some of this great education quality that we have here in Victoria. And I think it's interesting thinking about those market segments, because we know that a lot of people that study online here in Victoria or in Australia are those tend to be women in their mid-30s. They have children, they've got a job, maybe they're reskilling, or they're full-time mums and they don't have capacity to travel into a university and sit in class. And those are the people that are accessing online. Those people exist all around the world, and I think there's opportunity to reach those people and help them achieve their learning goals and their career goals as well.
Couldn't agree more. In fact, I suppose a few years ago I was deeply involved in, obviously Deacon's digital education program, and the people you describe are exactly the people who were that target, if you like. But it always worried me that, there are many, many benefits from an international experience, as we know, and we want to see that continue. And I'm sure that will come back to some degree. Whether it comes back to the same degree, who knows? It's no good even trying to fortune tell. However, I've always been exercised by the idea that a certain group of people around the world can afford, through family support, community support, whatever, to pack up, travel, and go and have an experience somewhere else. It also bothered me that so many of the people who signed up for fully online degrees in our system were the people who really couldn't get off Australian shores. They were, the mums and dads of Australia who've got jobs and kids in school. They can't just pack up and go. So how do we use the digital medium to actually give everyone a much more global experience? I'd also say we need to think about not always just that 3-year experience either. And of course, we know that when people travel internationally, they tend to study full time. So it's a lot of revenue for providers. It's a big cost for them, but it's a major investment in a particular period of your life. But thinking more broadly about digital now and innovation, where are all those underserved people around the world? We know, we're watching them, we can see them on the news, we can see people in distress, we can see people in need, people who need opportunity and want opportunity. I suppose I've always been interested in, how can Australia draw on its fabulous tradition of being a premium distance education provider to start with, then online learning, and now, and using vehicles like EduGrowth as well. How can we find those new groups of people? I'm not going to call them markets because I don't like calling learners markets, but anyway, you know what I mean. Lifelong learners, who want a short or a medium or a mini education experience and are prepared to do it on the screen largely, or a bit of screen, bit of on campus. How can we make much more out of that, and how can we really expand that? And usually, basically, how can we use this medium, which we're now all using all the time, to actually export this brilliant education? I think Australian education is really outstanding. How do we share that with the world? So I think there's ample opportunity for people. It's not easy. It's not going to be simple. There are many barriers to overcome, language being one of them, culture, broadband, others. But, there is a world of possibilities. So I'm hoping, through programs like this alliance that we're talking about, that we can start to see some of our EdTech products really embedded, tested, and then rolled out. So I'd love to see people engage in this program, always with a view to, yes, how can I work with a Victorian institution, but with a view on the horizon, because the world really is.
Absolutely. And I think the industry partnerships are so important between the education provider and the EdTech company and learning designers and user experience designers, because those people, say the user experience designer, don't have the same expertise or knowledge as the lecturer or the teacher, and the teacher doesn't necessarily have the same knowledge and experience as the tech person who's helping build the algorithms in the background or making it really easy for that person to engage with the content. And so it's really important for those people to come together and brainstorm and not just to be to go, oh, here's my problem, can you solve it? But actually be involved in the defining of the problem, and then the co-design in the solution as well, I think is really important, because that's when you're going to see really, I think, really much more meaningful courses. Both parties are going to get, or all parties are going to get the results that they're looking for. And again, I think the learner is going to get the best of everyone's expertise being fed into their course. And then ultimately it's more engaging, they can achieve those really great learning outcomes, and they have a really great experience. So I think that's part of the excitement of this program, I think, as well, is being able to create a space where people can come together and do that co-design and really test products and see what's working, what's not working, what do we need to work with, what do we need to adapt, and see, what can be improved to, as you say, sharing our fantastic education services with the world. I think there's so much great work that we can do around that. Just thinking back, Beverly, about lifelong learners, I think there's definitely something interesting to think about there for the sector generally. It feels like there was a focus on lifelong learning a while ago, and then it very much shifted to a focus on younger cohorts. And I feel like maybe there's going to start being a shift back to lifelong learning, especially, and this is your amazing expertise as well, around micro-credentials and stacking your learning outcomes. I know that for me as a professional, I'm very much looking at what bite-sized courses can I do to enhance my career. I don't have time to do a full master's program. What can I do to build on my career, build on my professional development over time as well, and keep adding to that so that I have a cohesive, course and story around how I've been evolving as a professional. So I think there's definitely something to think about there and how we do that successfully.
Look, I agree, and I'm going to pick up on David's comment that just flashed across the screen there as well. What are the new engagement modes? What I'd like to think is through programs like this, and this one happens to be in Victoria. I know there are people watching who are saying, well, can we have that in WA? Can we have it in New South Wales? I would urge you actually to approach your policymakers and say, well, this is what's happening in Victoria. How about we try something like this in our state? And then even one day we might actually be doing this as a federation, which would also be wonderful. But I'd really encourage people to not just try and replicate the old chalk and talk model. And we all know in the early days, and even now sometimes, online learning can be just a broadcast version. As I like to describe it, let's film the play. When we first invented the movie camera, what did we do with it? We filmed the play. And as you know, a movie and a play are completely different things now because people have really used their imagination. So what can we do differently? What can we do that we haven't even thought of yet? And yes, let's go to your question about truly lifelong learning. So whether you call it micro or macro credentials, I would love to see, again, a focus on the entire lifespan. And so I call this out as being those of us who are still in our initial education, that is K-12 if you like, and thinking about the next steps. Those of us who are pre-career and actually getting our first post-secondary qualification or trade, whatever that happens to be. But those later in the career, when you've established yourself in a career like yourself, and I'd also like to focus on those post-career. I'd also like to put on the table that, you know, post-pandemic, there may not be as much work to be had. Let's face it, before the pandemic, we were hearing about automation and the loss of jobs through automation. There were already hints that there would not be as much paid work around. What we've seen in the pandemic is a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands and a real wellspring, not a good word to use, but a real increase in mental health challenges. So how can we use education across the lifespan to keep people engaged, socially connected, intellectually engaged? Because we know that boredom and despair are a toxic combination. And I would like to think that education is part of a key strategy on our way out of this pandemic. It is like a world disruptive event. Everything's changed. How can education be part of the success story and the saving grace of this? What can we learn while we're all confined? You know, we've all been sent to our rooms to think about our lives. That's how I think about it. You know, what can we bring from that thinking to actually keep people engaged, socially engaged, social learning? Let's not try and just do chalk and talk, as I said. Let's actually engage people. So, you know, I'd like to think that this, you know, outstanding program that we're talking about is a real channel for people to think really broadly around what are the ideas I haven't even thought of yet to solve these really complex issues that we're talking about now, making our way out of this pandemic, plus growing and stretching overseas across the borders to a more global offer that's digital, hybrid, lifespan. Wow.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Beverly. And I think there's so much social good that education can bring. It can help just bring structure to the day. If you haven't got that structure at the moment, it can help bring that structure, a learning objective, and at the end of it, you come out with a really a great skill that you can then apply in your future work or life or whatever it might be. I think there's lots of great work there, and thinking about that social good, something that's been on my mind recently is around how actually digital learning can actually help us with some of our sustainable environment, climate change goals as well, in terms of we've actually seen through this pandemic that we don't necessarily need to travel all the time to do conferences like this. We don't necessarily need to travel as much as we used to, and I think that has got environmental benefits. And thinking about when we come out of the pandemic, can we just as easily catch up virtually like this? I'm really desperate to travel again, so I really can't wait. But also, just thinking, maybe we don't need to travel as much. What are the things that we can think about that are innovative, as you say, that meet some social good outcomes? Can we actually be meeting in virtual rooms that are completely through virtual reality? We're all an avatar, and we meet with people in a global classroom with people from all around the world. We have lecturers coming in, professors from universities in different countries helping to come in and teach us. I think there's lots of great ideas out there that we can pursue. I see David's joined us, so that must mean that we're almost out of time.
Must be getting the...
Yeah. I could talk to you about it forever, Beverly, so probably a good thing David's come to join us.
Or join in, David.
Yeah, please.
I am back here for the last couple of minutes. I know that we've got a few minutes left, and I just wanted to, because there's been a great conversation happening in the chat with delegates, and just really wanted to emphasize the point. Full details of the EdTech Innovation Alliance will be added to the EduGrowth website on Monday, so please stop sending me LinkedIn requests and text messages saying, how do I get involved? We love to have you involved, and all of the details will come out soon. The three key phases are that we've got a workshop will be happening at the end of September. From there, we'll open expression of interest, and then we'll run the innovation sprints for a period of up to 6 months, and then we'll have the symposium at the end. But it's an incredibly exciting project, and thank you to Global Vic for helping us bring it to life.
Absolute pleasure, David, and thank you, as always, for your partnership and collaboration and connection. Always love working with you and your team.
And you're hitting the brand messaging for EduGrowth as well, which I really like. That's very exciting. So
yeah, it's been absorbed.
No problem. Beverly, Caroline, thank you so very much for that. What we're going to do right now is say thank you. We're going to move into our next session. We'll have that session start in just one moment. So thank you very much. We're just going to run a quick short video, and then we'll be ready to go in a couple of minutes' time. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time, since we planned it and mapped out what we're going to be talking about today to set up the theme for the entire third day of the Melbourne EdTech Summit. We've asked leading journalist Tim Dodd to moderate the panel. Tim is the Australian's higher education sector editor. He has over 25 years experience as a journalist, covering a wide variety of areas in public policy, economics, politics, foreign policy, including reporting from the Canberra Press Gallery, and 4 years based in Jakarta as Southeast Asia correspondent for the Australian Financial Review. Thank you so very much for joining us, Tim, and agreeing to moderate this morning's conversation.
Thank you very much, David, and it's very pleasing to be here.
I'll hand the stage over to you to introduce Liz and Diana.
Thank you very much. And we have a great panel here this morning. We have Elizabeth Johnson, who is Deputy Vice-Chancellor Education at Deakin University, and she's in charge of that university's ambitious student learning and experience strategy. She has deep experience there. She was Pro Vice-Chancellor Teaching and Learning from 2013, so has been very closely involved in Deakin's development of its online learning over that period. It's also our privilege to have Deanna Ranieri from Northeastern University in Boston. And thank you for being here in this unfamiliar time zone, Deanna. And Deanna is the Senior Advisor to the President of the University for Learning Partnerships and Vice President and Senior Vice Chancellor for Experiential, Digital and Global Education. And very interestingly, she had previously worked at Coursera as Chief Academic Strategist. And that brings me to our first point. It's actually a notable anniversary. It's 10 years since the emergence of the MOOC. And over that period, we've seen a lot of change in online and digital education. And I think it's fair to say that there has been so much development in online over that period, but it's only now in the pandemic that we've seen millions and millions of new students be suddenly exposed to online, which raises the questions for them as to, is it working for them? How do we make it suit their needs in a more effective way? And so, Deanna, I'll start with you. If you could just say, well, in your experience over the years in this area, what's changed and how well are we dealing now with the needs of students in this time of immense challenge?
Right. No, thanks, Tim. So, maybe I'll throw a question back at you, which is, how do we define a student? And, we have our traditional residential students, that we teach on these great campuses around the world. But now we also have all of these lifelong learners, right? These professional students who are out there and increasingly looking to higher ed to help them, as they need to, keep their job, for example, because, their job is maybe be automated by some advancing technology, or they're looking for a new job or a better job, right? So those are our lifelong learners. And as we know today, everybody is a lifelong learner. And so when you ask, how well we are serving these students, I would say the needs of these students, the residential students and these professional learners, are a little different. For our residential students, I would say that so much their needs, their desires actually have changed this past year, from this very rapid, leap that so many of us had to make online. Some of us turning this around in a week, going from face-to-face classes to the online environment, often with not great results, right? Because for some of these classes, we didn't have the proper online materials. Many of these faculty had never taught online before. But, a year later, a lot of those students are saying that they actually want to continue with some of that online learning, even in that residential setting, right? So they're looking for that kind of hybrid offering to keep some of that online learning going. It gives them more flexibility. So we're definitely hearing on campus and many of the campuses in the US. The needs of professional learners are different. They're looking for a lot of flexibility. Obviously, I mean, they're, working professionals. They need that flexibility online. I would also say they're not necessarily looking. They're not mainly looking for our traditional academic program. They're looking for shorter form content. That upskilling or reskilling in a specialized area. They're also looking for job relevant content, very applied content. Like, how does this content actually help me, get the knowledge and skills that I need to get the job or do better in my current job? So with our lifelong learners, our professional learners, that real relevancy to the job. And often that takes us actually getting in there with companies and actually talking with companies and co-designing the learning with those companies. So again, slightly different need for those students.
Yeah, thanks very much, Deanna. And Liz, at Deakin, of course, you have been looking at how to supply the needs of these various types of learners now for some years. You've got extensive online programs and you've experimented with various approaches. What have you learned over that period, and how are you applying that now when there's now a need to make every student an online learner?
Thanks, Tim. Lovely to be with you today. The Deakin had an interesting history in that it was established as both a face-to-face university and also a distance provider. So we started a long time with the idea that not all learners have to be in the room with you. And that idea has been exploded globally through, as Deanna was describing, through MOOC platforms. But what it's done, there's kind of two things about that which I think are really important. Firstly, online learning changes access and participation. So if you've got an internet connection, suddenly you don't have to travel to work. But the other thing that it does is it's a native platform for work now. As we are doing today, people work online. It's the native platform for work. So for those two reasons, online education is particularly important. But the other aspect of it, which fits with Diana's discussion about lifelong learners, is that it caters to diversity. So if you've got people who've got other commitments, online learning is much more flexible for them. And the form of learning, whether it's short form learning from MOOCs or short courses or longer form learning, which universities have a great history in, that longer form learning is tailored to the individual and to their stage of the career. So when we're talking about lifelong learning, learners come to that with varying degrees of both ambition and maturity. So you can enter that knowing exactly what you need to get out of it. I need that additional skill or that additional technical expertise, and I know where to go and get it. Or I want to explore something completely different, and I need to have a look at the foundations and what it's like. So the advantage of online learning has given us capacity to personalise those learning journeys.
Yes. And how specifically are you personalising it for your different types of learners? Obviously, you have to look after the needs of undergraduates who are looking for as much interaction as possible with their peers and no doubt need more guidance in their learning. And as you described, Deanna, there are other types of learners as well. There are those who are postgraduates, there are those who are reskilling, those who are wanting to change career, and continuing learners. And now, of course, we're seeing the emergence of short courses and badges as an alternative way of learning. So how flexible is digital in dealing with these different types of approaches?
Mm-hmm. So do you want me to jump
Deanna,
in this?
Yes, please, Deanna.
So I know Liz is going to pick up on this too. So let me take a shot at this. And I think this is something, I mean, the word MOOC is coming up a lot here. Yes. And, I was at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign when the MOOC hype came, right, or MOOC tsunami, depending on how you were looking at it. And I remember at the time, there was a lot of nervousness and anxiety in higher ed. Oh my gosh, is this going to lead to demise any of these great institutions? And of course that didn't happen. However, these providers are playing a very, very important role. And accessibility, as Liz talked about, is one of that, the big role they are playing, right, through lower cost options. But, the point I want to make here is that really this isn't about the MOOCs now, right? There's still a lot of MOOCs, a lot of free content out there, which is fantastic. But most of these providers, Coursera, edX, YouTube, and Udacity, there's a lot of them. They've moved beyond that and now have these amazing portfolios, working, of course, with the universities, these amazing portfolios, credentialed content, everything from 4-credit module, course, certificate, all the way up to degrees. And the great thing about a lot of that is, for example, the degree. The most of these degrees are designed as modular, stackable offerings. And so, in terms of flexibility for learners and access, or you say personalization, this allows for the right amount of learning at the right time. So in other words, it's giving these learners many different options. So say there's somebody looking to upskill or reskill in their job. They can just jump in and take just the certificate. And actually, they can take it not for credit and maybe pay a monthly subscription fee. Or they can take it for credit, have engagement with faculty, with teaching assistants, and pay the degree tuition. Or they say, I want to get a completely new job. I'm going to need a degree. And they can register for the degree. Well, what if they actually don't know? Or they don't know that online learning is going to. They can actually go and register, enroll in a certificate, and dip their toe in the water to say, is this going to work? Can I learn this way? Do I like this experience? And then they may say, you know what? I crushed that one. I want the degree. And that prior learning or performance stacks in to the degree. So what it's doing is it's giving learners, these options and personalizing, the experience for them. And the other great thing about this, again, I'm going to pick up on Liz's point about accessibility, this is a way for universities to provide lower cost offerings. Because with these large platforms, with millions, tens of millions of learners registered on these platforms, we can offer these degrees and these certificates at lower cost. So this really promotes accessibility, and is also for universities, helping them to recognize new audiences, new learners. So I just want, so that's one point I wanted to make. And now I'm going to turn over to Liz. I'm sure she's going to make many more.
Yes, Liz. And specifically, Liz, how do you aim online and digital learning for undergraduate students who do need more support in their learning and who are looking to engage with their peers? Liz, are you with us still? Deanna, are you still with us?
I still am, but Liz is broken on my
I don't think Liz can hear us right now. So let's move on to the point that you made about lower cost of digital. That is going to be an immense challenge for universities to deal with this if they see other providers who come from the commercial sphere offering high quality courses at lower cost. What sort of disruption are we going to see in this sector?
Right. So I'll make a couple of points about that. And I think this is an important thing that, even when I as you mentioned, I did spend, 3.5 years with Coursera. And one thing that I was always coaching the team on is, remember, this isn't Coursera's content. This is all the universities that we work with. This is their content. It was very easy to kind of flip into that. This is Coursera or edX's or Future's content. All of this content is coming from these great universities. The universities are doing this, and they are, through scale, able to do this at lower cost. I think that moving forward, I think another thing that this past year has done that I think many of us are going to struggle with is it has shown that, and also the MOOC providers, what they have done is they've shown that it is possible for us to, offer some of the programs at lower cost, through scale, but also by, customizing the content to their specific. And I think it is going to behoove us to actually think about other ways that we can reduce the cost of education for more students.
Yes. Liz, you're back with us. Good to see you again.
Apologies, Tim. I think I'm in inner Melbourne this morning, and the entirety of Melbourne is trying to talk to each other.
Well, that's one of the problems that we have in a pandemic, unfortunately, but we can get through that. So I was asking you specifically about how Deakin is aiming its courses at the different types of students, and in particular for undergraduates who need more support in their education, and they want to be able to engage with their peers as well.
Yeah, so this is, of course, a pressing problem in the pandemic. I would say, though, that there is a fair influence of prior expectations. So we've monitored our students' confidence in study and assessment over the last 18 months. And as they've experienced, as all of them have experienced online learning, their confidence in studying online and assessment has just risen and risen and risen to the point where our students who chose on-campus enrolment are now approaching the levels of confidence that our online students already had. So experience is a great teacher. Now, having said that, you do have to think about student support and help both teachers and learners to engage in different environments. So the advantage, I guess, we had was many of our teachers knew this was possible because they had already been working with online learners. It didn't mean that the shift was any easier. We, like everybody else, we were turning on a dime, but it did mean that that possibility was there. And there's a few things. First of all, keep it simple, make it accessible, use channels that you already know, make sure that students have simple ways of connecting with teachers and with each other, give them lots of reassurance, have things available online so they can find them. There's lots of things we can learn from all sorts of online interactions.
Yes. And the pandemic is undoubtedly going to change the way universities approach education. I doubt that things will be the same in future. So, Liz, at Deakin, would you be changing classes which were formerly face-to-face and using more digital content in them?
We've been on that journey for a while, Tim, and yes, it's a priority. So I was listening to Beverly Oliver at the end of the previous session, and I worked with Beverly for many years. She led a digital revolution at Deakin, which I'd like to acknowledge. The phrase we used, we call our online environment Cloud Deakin. And so we started a learning design program a few years ago now called Cloud First, with the idea that if you design well for online learners, in fact, you're designing well for all learners, because almost all, certainly in Australia, but I think globally, all universities now use learning management systems. They're a bit crude in places, but they've been blended for a long time. So the thing is to recognise that and use what each channel is best for. If you're going to bring people on campus, do it because there's something you can do there which is not as good online. If you're going to be online, make sure you're using it to its best advantage. So it's that more nuanced and sophisticated design which makes the best of both environments.
Yes. And Deanna, we just heard Liz say that at Deakin, because of their long involvement in digital learning, that staff are familiar with it. But in your experience, what do academics and teachers need to be able to make that transition from teaching in the classroom to teaching successfully online?
Right. A number of things. It's really, I'm going to say something maybe a little bit controversial, but I'm very much a believer that, content is a commodity. It's increasingly become a commodity. And I really feel that with, online learning, much more of a focus on the learning experience, which is, how do you engage the online learner or the online student? How do you get them working together? Teamwork, online projects, etc. I would say that we spend a lot of time working with faculty focused on that, not on the content per se, but, projects, teamwork, community, and, applying the learning through projects, bringing in, industry experts, etc. So it's more focused on, I would say, the experience and really on the content. But also working with faculty. There's a big difference, when we go and teach in a classroom. When I taught in a classroom, I put together my lecture notes, and I did everything myself. I didn't have any help. And that was the way it was. You just did it. When we, are working with a faculty member to take a course online, there's a whole team that we wrap around those faculty to help them think about how, what are the outcomes that you want here, and what is the best way to present online. So it really is a different model where we provide a lot of support to these faculty about how to transition what they have just done in the classroom, to the online environment, working with these instructional designers and the learning designers. I'll say my first attempt to take a class online was a disaster. I just picked up what I did in the classroom, plunked it online. I think just every student went to sleep. So it's that key. We have a lot of experts involved.
Yes. Now, let's move on to one of the big questions, I think, which are facing higher education institutions now as they look at the opportunities to scale online education, and over their shoulders they are seeing a lot of competition appearing in different forms. There's the MOOC model, which Coursera is part of. There are OPMs, online program managers, appearing who will offer to take on a lot of the work in producing online education courses. And there's the possibility for universities to just buy in standardized content, as you mentioned, Deanna. In many ways, course content is becoming a commodity. So where do universities go from here? Of course, 10 years ago when MOOCs appeared, there was a lot of talk at that time that we are seeing the end of the university as we know it. Over that period, it has not happened, but as we've seen in other areas of industry which are challenged by online competitors, when it does happen, it can happen very suddenly. So how do you see the future now? And starting with you, Liz, what are the competition threats to universities like Deakin, and how do you deal with that?
A very hot topic, Tim.
Yes.
The immediate answer is partnership. So there are things that universities are very good at that we as a society, as a world, don't want to lose. So they are knowledge generators, but they also know a great deal about how to teach in a discipline. So they understand what it takes to bring people into the discipline and understand the area that they're looking at. They're very good at longer form learning, and that longer form trajectory of really getting into and exploring a discipline in depth. And I don't think that's easily replicated elsewhere. So they are an unusual conjunction of knowledge generation, understanding about teaching and learning in the discipline, and they hold a lot of quality assurance. So in Australia, they hold quality assurance as that's governed by the TEXA Act, and it ensures both peer review and connectivity out. So the important thing for universities for the future is to be part of a more a more extensive solution. Now, we do it already a bit. So in some areas, for example, in IT is the classic example of a rapidly moving field. Absolutely suited to just-in-time upgrades, reskills, and longer and short-form learning. And for a long time, universities have embedded industry certification inside their degrees, and they work closely with industry. And that's the smart thing to do, because if you're Microsoft, you don't necessarily need your employees to come in with an IT degree, but that student who wants to study IT and have the longer form learning to do different things needs to be able to see what the industry relevance is. So that partnership, working closely with industry, working closely with community actually as well, is where the future is.
Yes, indeed. And Deanna, what's your perspective on this? You've worked for a long time in this area, including at Coursera, so you've seen the revolution at the bottom, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Liz put it beautifully. Actually, the first word out of my mouth would have been exactly what Liz said, which is partnership. I don't see all these providers as a threat. I see them as an opportunity. We all bring different value to the table, right? And, they can support things at an enterprise level. And why do we want to do that, right? We have the faculty, we have this great passion. We know how to teach. We know how to get learners excited about the content. So that is key. And also, another thing that I was going to mention is how do we differentiate ourselves, right? And exactly what Liz said there. I mean, one of the things we are doing is working closely with companies. Bringing in, real industry relevant examples and embedding them in our academic content, in our program. So I do feel, there's value on both sides. And to me, 2 + 2 equals 5 in this case.
Yes. And so what students need in many courses, particularly in the early years of undergraduate courses, is very standardized. Like if you are looking, say, at psychology 1 or biology 1 or computing 1, whatever you choose to look at, it's pretty standard stuff across universities. So is that one way that universities will make themselves more efficient and lower costs, to just buy in that content in online courses which are extremely well made and well designed and easy to learn from, and so universities will just channel those instead of developing it themselves? Is that a way that they will go in the future? And if they do, why would you choose one university over another?
So Tim, I'm going to take a historical perspective here, because what you're describing is exactly what textbooks were. So when big glossy textbooks came out, the idea was that they would capture the content of a discipline and nobody would have to decide what to teach anymore. But the reality is that learners work through relationships, and they most learners need relationships beyond the content. They need the guide, they need the peers, they need the things that go around it. So we have tried to encourage our staff to reuse content that already exists. And there's a lot of that already happens. But how you put it together and how you tailor it to your learners in your time and your space, that's an academic exercise which takes local knowledge.
Yes, well, I think that textbook analogy is a good one, but textbooks don't speak to you and enable you to work interactively with them. as the best online learning can. So online learning is much more powerful than a textbook, and it can be standardized.
Yes, and I'm not trying to suggest otherwise, but I guess the corollary is when textbooks became available, that was a revolution.
Yes.
But it didn't stop the importance of having a teacher with you.
Right.
And how you nuance that content for the purpose of your learners at the time, that's a local academic decision. So when you think about longer form learning, what you're trying to do is to get the student to see the arc of learning. Where is it all going? How do you describe the field? And that there's a lot of expertise in sewing those pieces together. But yes, of course we should reuse content. It'd be silly not to.
Yes. And Deanna, it seems to me that in the future, a university teacher will need to have not only different skills, but have a different vision of their career. And they'll have to develop a lot of specialist areas of their expertise, which are related to teaching online. So how does this change the picture of what an academic career is, and will we see more diversion between those who are in a research stream and those who are in a teaching stream?
No, that's a great question. And I would actually say that we're already seeing that. Many of our new faculty are coming in. They've already, taught online, maybe as when they were a graduate student. They're very comfortable with that environment. And they actually see that for them, teaching is no longer just in the classroom. It's going to be a combination of online as well as in person. And to be honest, for many of them, they see this as a benefit because it also gives them the flexibility. So, for example, in biology, I'm actually a molecular biologist.
Okay.
A lot of biologists, they spend a lot of time in the field. And actually, I remember the first time we built this online, content for biology courses, the researchers were in love with it because there were times of the year when they really wanted to be in the field, and it was hard because they had to teach school. Now they could teach it remotely. So it's flexibility for the student. This is, part of what the students are asking for as well, right? But it's also giving our faculty flexibility in their lives and a different way of thinking about things and ways to, I would say, one of them said to me, to mix up the class. It's no longer just about me. Through the online medium, I can bring in my colleagues, experts, students from all over the world. So I think the faculty now are just seeing this as, that it's different, and they're having fun with it.
Okay. And we have mentioned the interaction with employers, and the key part of that, both for employers and for students, is work integrated learning, which everyone sees as being more important now. And with the advent of digital options, it seems that there are now more ways of doing work integrated learning. So what are you doing at Deakin, Liz?
Well, online work integrated learning has taken off like a rocket, Tim. So not surprisingly, since we're all shut in, but actually both our employer partners and students have embraced it really, really well. And in fact, students tell us that certainly in many circumstances, they're getting more interaction with employers through an online medium than they would have if they'd gone into the office. I think that's online is very personal. You're talking immediately to somebody else, and it can be quite rapid. So I think it's bringing out new strengths, new affordances in work integrated learning. There are some really, really interesting models for work integrated learning emerging, and we should remember that it's industry and community, not just firm.
Yes.
But really interesting models coming, and also picking up on the shift in authentic work. So an example is telehealth. Telehealth in Australia is now universal. It's now an integral part of all our health professional courses because it's a normal environment to work in. So, and likewise teaching, our teaching placements now include online teaching. So that's happened very rapidly indeed. It's not going to go away. It's here forever.
Yes. Now you're at the stage at Deakin where every student in every course is taking part in work integrated learning?
I'm doing my best, Tim. So,
Okay.
so we're close. I think, yes, we're getting to the point where building that up through disciplines as they build out their employer networks. And yes, we are close. And that's certainly an ambition.
Yes. And Deanna, so I know that the Northeastern is particularly involved in work integrated learning. That's one of your specialties there. But if you look more broadly in the US and North America, how embedded is work integrated learning in universities at the moment, and what's changing?
It's not, I would say. I think we need to see a lot more of that. You mentioned, yes, Northeastern, the co-op. I mean, one of the reasons I was particularly excited to go to Northeastern is this amazing co-op experience that they have where undergrad, starting in their second year, spend 6 months of the year working for the company. And we are now taking that into online learning. So, working actually with both traditional as well as with professional learners, some of the learning is actually built into their work stream. Mm-hmm. So they're actually applying the learning as they're doing their job. And, I know that there are many, some other institutions are doing this, but I think we need to see a lot more of it. There's a lot of interest. It does take a long time. I think we were really able to benefit from the more than 3,000 company relationships we already had because of our programs where we could get in there and really start working with companies. But there is a lot of excitement and interest in that. It comes up in a lot of conferences and a lot of, academic, roundtables. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of it in these coming years. Right now, I would say there's not a lot.
Right. Okay. And one related aspect of this is working with employers on the content of courses. Of course, in many programs, that there has to be an accreditation by industry bodies, but in many other courses at the moment, that is not a requirement. So more generally, are we going to see a universal approach to all teaching programs, that there needs to be close consultation with industry, with employers as to what the content of the programs is?
Yes, that's right, Tim, and we will. So the question here is to make it easy for employers to interact. And universities for a very long time have been quite bizarre places for employers to interact with. They have weird timetables. They're really complex structures. They're hard to find out who you should speak to. Universities, excuse me, think that they've got course advice groups and they're consulting, but the depth of consultation varies enormously. So for our health courses, it's quite tight. If you talk to our nurses, for example, they are in and out of clinical situations all the time.
Yeah.
But for a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science, it's a much more distant relationship.
Yes.
So but we have to make it easy for employers to work with us. And that means we need to be respectful of their timelines, of their capabilities. We have to give them options to interact at their level. So a small firm will have a much different sort of interaction to a large national or multinational firm and what they can do.
Yeah. And Deanna, we are coming toward the end of our time, unfortunately, but in the couple of minutes left, maybe you could describe how Northeastern goes about establishing its relationships with employers and the extent to which you take their feedback in building course content.
Oh, absolutely. Like I say, we benefited a lot in terms of the online learning that we have done by, we were able to dip in already a very extensive network of employer partners. And, we reached out and just started talking to them about, what challenges are you? I mean, that was, the first question. How can we help? We want to help you with your talent. And, that was what really kicked off the conversation. Here are all, we can't get skilled talent, X, Y, Z. And then we would look at our offerings and see where the gaps are. So as soon as the employers know that you are really here to solve, to help them solve their talent, it's a whole different conversation. And, to answer your question as well, I mean, I think this has to happen. We are hearing so much, and in all the journals you read, we hear about this skills gap, how, companies, feel that we're not training, that our college graduates aren't ready for the jobs that they have. And I think a lot of that is because technology has automated a lot of the jobs that our graduates were walking into. And they're saying that there's a gap now, that they're not prepared for these jobs of the future. And so going and saying, okay, where's the gap? How can we help? And we are embedding their trainings, we're embedding their certifications into our program and working with them to help solve some of those talent needs. And sometimes we need skilled talent, we need workforce diversification, and how can we work together to accomplish that? And it's really the partnership. Some companies have tried to do this on their own. And, I think that's been a struggle. Again, we each bring value to the table, and the partnership, I think, is going to make this happen.
Yes. Well, look, I think we may even have time for one more question. And at the moment, we have a major issue in Australia, Liz, with accessing or offering access to international students, many of whom are still overseas. How have you been able to leverage your online learning to assist them, and has that worked when they're actually overseas and have no possibility of physical contact with the university?
It's been really interesting, Tim. We have been able to deliver online learning globally. Mind you, we were doing it before, so that wasn't the technology wasn't such a problem. Our online learners have been surprisingly, international online learners have been surprisingly persistent, because most of them expected to transfer from online learning to onshore learning, as they would describe it. We'll see. The closed borders that Australia's got, the timeline for that is unknown. So I think it's a struggle for online learners to imagine what the next step of their program is. For those who thought they were going to transition from online to onshore programs, they're still hoping to do that, but we'll see how that pans out over the next little while. The other point that you make, the bigger point, I suppose, is what does this look like for the future? And again, I think the answer is in partnership. So if I have something to offer, for example, to our colleagues in India, and Deakin has a long-standing and close relationship with Indian partners, we've got to think about what value are we bringing to the local community and to local learners. And we have a number of partnerships in place where we are working, co-designing and delivering with educational partners in India. And we're finding that's probably a more successful approach than saying, here's our online degree, Indian learners, just sign in.
Right. And do you mean that the learners in India are working partly online and partly face-to-face at a local institution?
We've got a number of different versions of this, so to varying degrees. And again, it's about what is right for the learning that you're trying to teach and what is right for the people that are trying to learn.
Yes. Great. Well, I see that David is back with us, which definitely means Our time is up, but thank you, Liz. Deanna.
I'm happy for you. We'll just continue. We've got 4 more hours of live content. I just want this conversation to continue. Partnerships, industry engagement, students performing at their best, regardless of where they are. There's nothing in here that I want to stop. This has been exciting. So Liz, Tim and Deanna, thank you so very much. And I get to share with you, I've been watching the delegates and there's been vigorous conversation around the idea that we can connect learners where they are, where they need, what they need, to industry, to jobs, to partnerships. It's all very exciting. Thanks, Liz, Tim and Deanna.
A pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
And that sort of brings us to a really great point within today's program to start thinking and extending our partnerships and concepts idea across to others. So we've got an opportunity now to hear from some amazing Australian EdTech companies, EduGrowth members, people that are producing fantastic tools and solutions to support learners here and around the world. We'll have a short break where you'll be able to see these people pitch, but you'll be able to go and have a break. And we'll join you back here for 30 minutes where we'll be discussing the EdTech innovation landscape with Cherie Diaz from Open Learning, Sherman Young, the Interim Deputy Vice Chancellor of Education at RMIT, and Chris Fitzpatrick from Studiosity. See you soon.
Throughout history, one-to-one learning has always worked. I ask, you listen, I think, I strive, you guide, I succeed. Because that guidance from the right person has to come at the right time. Because in education, quality, time, people, equity, and integrity matter. But all too often, support is inaccessible or unavailable for too many. What if it weren't? What if the right person were always there, were ready and waiting to help? Thoughtfully designed, thoughtfully delivered, captivating, on demand. That's how you change the world and improve life chances for all. It takes an institution with agility, vision, integrity to complete the student ecosystem, mirroring your standards, overcoming colossal education challenges together. Because asking for help is brave. User-first technology is easy to use, easy to trust, always friendly, always evolving, always available. Together with a network of universities and education providers delivering high-quality study support, building life chances for all.
So there's up to 20,000 products in the supermarket. We want to know why, via research, people are purchasing what they're purchasing and how they're feeling about those purchases.
While cash register software can calculate any change needed, it's very useful to know how to work it out yourself.
Chapter 3 covers food safety standards. This includes standards for food premises and equipment, like ensuring staff are trained in hygienic food practices.
In the early conceptual stages, prototyping and testing was really important to make a wheel, put it on a bike and see if it would actually work.
Possessing teamwork skills is valuable to employers as it ensures that work is completed in the most efficient way.
Overwhelmed by all the different study options? Don't stress, there's an easier way. With StudyMe, the possibilities will find you. StudyMe is a platform that connects students with top universities around the world. We help you find the best fit university for you. It's quick, simple, and totally free. Here's how it works. First, you create a profile. Add your interests, academics, and career aspirations. Then, universities get an alert to review your details. Interested universities will get in touch to introduce themselves. If you like what you hear, you can accept their invitation to chat. You'll talk directly with a university staff member, getting personal advice on the things that matter to you. Ask them what it's like to study there, about the course specifics and the admission process. If the university thinks you're a good fit, then you'll get an invitation to apply. You can apply with confidence, knowing you're very likely to be accepted. Don't leave it to chance. Join StudyMe and be discovered by the best universities in the world.
Hi, I'm Gordon from Successful Graduate. I want to spend just 2 minutes explaining to you what we're about. You're receiving this message because I think there could be some opportunities for us to work together. You see, our business delivers co-branded employability training websites for education providers, for job services agencies, and for government clients. Put simply, we deliver online student employability skills training en masse and at scale. We're working with some great clients across Australia and the Asia Pacific region at the moment, and we're proud to have supported tens of thousands of students across that region during the pandemic. We've developed a variety of training courses that are designed to suit student employability at different stages in the student life cycle, from high school preparation through to tertiary alumni career development. Now, our training is making a real difference to the lives of students, and with the heightened awareness and acceptance of online training as a result of the pandemic, online employability is here to stay as part of the mainstream of the education sector. So I'd love to talk to you about how we can add value to your student value proposition. There's a link in my message to my calendar, and I'd love to set up a Zoom demonstration meeting with you, I'd welcome the opportunity to learn more about you and how we can help your students to become successful graduates. Speak soon.
For years, teachers and learning designers have grappled with how to get students to respond to course material in context and without leaving the LMS. The workarounds to this problem are as complex as they are numerous, but only ever solve half the problem. Have you considered how many hours you have wasted building material that students never engage with? Or how many student documents have been lost because of bad file management? Welcome to the Learning Journal, a cloud-based solution for student engagement with an intelligent dashboard that lets you build smarter learning experiences designed to capture student reflections and feedback. With the Learning Journal, you can create engaging learning activities that students complete as they progress through the course, allowing them to revise their responses as they encounter new information, allowing you to track your students' responses over their learning journey. Recurring reflection journals can be created for your learners to reflect weekly, monthly, or quarterly on your school's values or their own emotional and social well-being. The possibilities are endless with the Learning Journal, allowing instructors to easily embed questions, images, and video for students to respond to and complete as they move through your course. Best of all, because it is cloud-based, students have longevity of access, creating portfolios they can share within their network. The Learning Journal makes it easy to design and deliver exceptional learning experiences. Contact us today at thelearningjournal.co.
PeopleBench is a school workforce research and analytics company. Through our online benchmarking tool, our community of practice and our advisory services, we're helping principals and system leaders to build better school workforces. Education workforces globally are in crisis. Leaders today face teacher shortages, difficulties in attraction and retention, gender imbalances, ageing workforces, and the risk of poor staff psychological outcomes. These challenges can have a crippling impact on school communities and represent an enormous threat to the future of education. At PeopleBench, our team of workplace psychologists, educators and advisors are helping to answer the critical question: what makes a fantastic school workforce? While we know that the intuition and experience of leaders is fundamental to good decision making, we believe that they deserve an evidence base and tools to help them move beyond intuition and address the big workforce strategy challenges the sector faces today. Subscribing to PeopleBench helps school leaders to stop the guessing. We're doing the research to discover which workforce factors make the biggest difference to student outcomes. Access practical tools to build better schools' workforces. Belong to a community of practice where they can access school workforce improvement tools, share case studies, and contribute to the lifting of the standard of school workforces across the country. The greatest predictor of high impact teaching is the quality of the teacher and their relationship with their students. Great teaching workforces don't happen by accident. Subscribe now and start building a better school workforce today.
Hi, I'm Gordon from Successful Graduate. I want to spend just 2 minutes explaining to you what we're about. You're receiving this message because I think there could be some opportunities for us to work together. You see, our business delivers co-branded employability training websites for education providers, for job services agencies and for government clients. Put simply, we deliver online student employability skills training en masse and at scale. We're working with some great clients across Australia and the Asia Pacific region at the moment, and we're proud to have supported tens of thousands of students across that region during the pandemic. We've developed a variety of training courses that are designed to suit student employability at different stages in the student life cycle, from high school preparation through to tertiary alumni career development. Now, our training is making a real difference to the lives of students, and with the heightened awareness and acceptance of online training as a result of the pandemic, online employability is here to stay as part of the mainstream of the education sector. So I'd love to talk to you about how we can add value to your student value proposition. There's a link in my message to my calendar, and I'd love to set up a Zoom demonstration meeting with you. I'd welcome the opportunity to learn more about you and how we can help your students to become successful graduates. Speak soon.
Revs! Mirrors! Clock! Away! And brake! Hang fire! I nearly forgot the most essential step. Tickety-boo.
Gloria needs to prepare an online class for Monday. She only has an hour. How can OB3 speed this process up for her? She already has some content.
A Word doc from last year's course is a good start. Transferring into OB3 is a snap. She checks everything came in correctly, clean up things along the way using OB3's editing features.
An image would be nice for the start. And there's a video and a quote to add.
A couple of PowerPoint slides have useful content. There's a diagram. And a table.
She would like to get her students involved through discussions. Finally, there's a course feedback form.
OB3, beautiful study for lifelong learning. Engage students, empower teachers.
The British invasion of the Australian continent created tragic and long-lasting changes to the way many Indigenous people were living.
So when we're thinking about bias, when we're looking at that data, there's a danger that we might be seeking a pattern, whether it's there or not.
Hi, I'm Dan McFadden, Managing Director of EdTech. At EdTech, we surface learning outcomes, digital assets, and the power of individual achievement. We do this through our platforms OpenEquella and Credentialate. OpenEquella is a digital repository used to discover, manage, and share digital assets. With Credentialate, we discover and share evidence of workplace skills. For students, Credentialate helps give them a voice, a way to articulate their skills and expertise in workplace relevant skills. For institutions or organizations, Credentialate helps them scale and automate micro-credential programs, as well as gain great insight into the achievement, or just as importantly, non-achievement of credentials. And for prospective employers, Credentialate provides validated, meaningful evidence of workplace skills for their applicants.
Sophiri Recruit 360 is a new recruitment program to help educational providers lower the cost of student acquisition, improve the quality of applicants, enhance diversity, and to convert accepted applicants to successfully enroll. The program includes all the essential elements of a successful marketing and recruitment campaign. 1. Customized marketing to generate quality inquiries. 2. Local counseling for student engagement, application, and visa assistance. 3. A powerful technology platform to keep everyone connected and to simplify the admissions process. The first phase of the program is to fill the top of the enrollment funnel with a generous number of inquiries responding to a customized, provider-specified marketing campaign. Qualified leads, filtered by an intelligent chatbot, will then register onto the 360 recruitment platform and be matched to your full-time local 360 counselor. The regional counselor speaks the primary language of the applicant and is knowledgeable about programs, courses, campus life, and will provide superior customer service in assisting with application and visa processes. Throughout the student's entire journey, all communication and assistance occur on the 360 recruitment platform. Students have the option of using either mobile or web apps, and everything is fully branded to your educational institution. Students and counselors can talk by instant messaging or video conferencing, and your recruitment team can monitor the entire process and also assist along the way, including helping to convert students with offers. Sophiri Recruit 360 will help you meet your recruitment goals through superior technology and customer service. And the best part, there are no upfront fees, and everything can be ready to go within a couple weeks. Contact Sophiri today to learn more and to discover how student recruitment can be optimized.
I want to engage with every single student. I guess that's the ideal teacher, one that's able to engage with every single student on an individual level, but that's practically impossible for the class size that I have. So I'm a lecturer in the Faculty of Engineering, and I teach a first year unit which is over 600 students. Because we have so many students, it's hard to engage with every student on an individual level. And so Flux provides that platform for them to ask questions anonymously, but also participate. When I design my workshops, I always keep in mind what the learning outcomes of the workshop will be. And then I tailor my Flux questions around those learning outcomes, just to give me a measure of their understanding throughout the class. I guess it challenges them on the spot without having to put too much pressure on them, because they know that every other student in the class is also experiencing the same thing. But also there's a lot of peer learning that's happening when there's a Flux question, because we allow discussions between students in order for them to arrive at the correct answer. But even if they get the wrong answer, there's some time after the poll closes for them to discuss. I guess I want to be able to measure every student's progress and tailor my teaching towards their needs. I think it's really important these days for students to get instant feedback, and Flux allows that.
Intern Match are proud to have co-authored the Global Internship Challenge with the Mandela Foundation. In response to the unexpected outcome of global remote working, we are currently placing youth from around the world into professional remote internships around the world. This means, for example, that graduates from Africa are now completing a professional internship with a company in Australia or North America or the United Kingdom. We know that a professional internship provides hands-on experience, builds professional networks, and facilitates the first important step into employment. Successfully executing on such a grand vision has only been possible with the application of smart technology. Our cutting-edge software enables us to facilitate the placement of thousands of interns simultaneously. We ensure that everyone inside our platform has a valuable experience. Our role at Intern Match is not only to power the Global Internship Challenge, it's to assist governments to close the youth unemployment gap. It's to help companies get access to fresh talent from around the world. And, most importantly, it's to enable youth globally to achieve their dreams.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to our next session here at the Melbourne EdTech Summit. Just a quick reminder of a couple of things. You've got the ability to have a conversation with other delegates on the Balloon platform. You can also ask questions. They can end up here on the front stage. And at our lunch break coming up in an hour or so, a couple of hours time, you'll actually get the opportunity to have a bit of light entertainment. We have a magician playing. It's my great pleasure now to introduce Cherie Diaz, who joined Open Learning in 2018, where she thrives on the opportunity to leverage her experience as an educator, an operational executive to partner with users of the Open Learning platform. In 2020, she co-authored the OpenCreds micro-credentialing framework, Australia's first lifelong learning framework designed to meet the needs of learners, employers, and education providers. Prior to joining Open Learning, Cherie was Head of Education Delivery at the Australian Institute of Company Directors, where she led faculty engagement, education delivery. She was Director of CPD and Lifelong Learning. Thanks very much, Cherie.
Thanks,
Hi,
David.
Cherie, how's it going?
Good. I've enjoyed all the sessions, and this morning was, really locked into the conversation. I was sad to see them end. So
I'm looking forward to this conversation, actually. And before we jump into it, allow me to personally thank you and the entire Open Learning team for the support of the Melbourne EdTech Summit as partners this year.
Oh, thank you. We're always, happy to be involved in supporting such a great organisation.
Fantastic. We've got sound, we've got lights, we've got vision, so I'll hand over to you.
Great. Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for making the time to join this conversation. I'm really pleased to introduce two great participants in the Australian education and EdTech sector. First of all, I'll introduce Chris Fitzpatrick. So Chris has a career of more than 25 years in education technology, IT and operations. His real focus and passion is on helping people, which is great because Studiosity, where he is at the moment, currently helps 1.6 million students, working closely with their higher education partners to help deliver the complete 24/7 student experience. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Cherie. Hi, everyone. Great to be with you.
Great. I'm going to also introduce Sherman, and then we'll get into the conversation. So I'd like to introduce Professor Sherman Young, who's the Interim Deputy Vice-Chancellor Education and Vice President of RMIT. Appointed to the role in January 2021, he's responsible for the student journey from enrolment through to graduation. Prior to taking on this role, he was formerly the Associate Deputy Vice-Chancellor Education and Executive Director of RMIT Studios, where he was responsible for leading learning and teaching strategy, practice and innovation across the university, including RMIT's educational response to COVID-19. Just a small task there, Sherman, to take on board over the last 18 months.
I wish it was over, Cherie, but unfortunately it keeps going, doesn't it?
It does. I think everyone would agree they wish it was over. But anyway, let's look at the positives that have come out of it and what we can take away as we move forward as well. So I'm not going to assume that everyone that's listening in today or will listen to this recording down the track knows who you are and the organisations you represent. So I might start with you, Chris, to sort of introduce Studiosity and the role that you play in the ecosystem as well. And then Sherman, I'll hand over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Cherie. So my role with Studiosity, and I've been with Studiosity for about 5 years now, is as General Manager responsible for the APAC region. So for those of you who don't know the work that we do, we work with our university partner. We work with schools and actually municipal libraries as well, and the TAFE sector. We'll focus particularly on the work that we do with tertiary providers. So we work with our TAFE and university partners to support their student success strategies, and particularly in terms of student support, we provide 24/7 academic literacy and numeracy support. So on demand, student gets stuck after hours on a concept in maths or science or with their writing or English, they can connect through the learning management system within a couple of minutes to get personalised help from a real person. We also provide them with formative writing feedback support. So academic writing skills are an area that a lot of our university partners are looking to help their students with. So students can connect again through their LMS, submit a draft document, get formative feedback from a real person within a few hours, focusing on their academic literacy, the fundamentals of their writing, structure, punctuation, grammar, particular emphasis on academic integrity as well. And then finally, and more recently, we're working a lot with our university partners to tap into those other talent pools that they have available for helping students. And particularly, I'm talking about their own students. So students able to connect on demand to students at their university that can help them with the more content specific, university specific problems they might come up against. So that's generally how we support our university partners, all aimed at helping students to be more successful.
Awesome, thanks. And Sherman?
So can I begin just by taking a moment to acknowledge the people of the Wurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations on whose unceded land RMIT conducts its business, and pay my respects to ancestors and elders past, present and emerging. So I'm currently the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Education at RMIT University, and for those who don't know RMIT, it's a fairly big university. We're dual sector. So we have a VE, a vocational education area, as well as a higher education sector. And across all of our campuses, which includes Vietnam, 3 campuses in Melbourne, and a number of partners in Southeast Asia, and a presence in Europe, we have about 95,000 students. So it's a significant, complex, multi-dimensional university, which is full of challenges and opportunities. And it's been a great privilege to be part of the academic leadership team and to really think about, particularly in the last couple of years, how the challenges of that we're all facing as a sector can be addressed. And for me, COVID has simply accelerated all of those challenges. We know that student expectations are changing. We know that the policy framework is changing. We know that competition is emerging right across the world, really, for education. And we also know that employer expectations are firming up, and we're getting a much clearer picture of what employers actually need. My personal background is that I'm a humanities academic, and a lifetime ago, I wrote a book called The Book is Dead, Long Live the Book, which got me into a little bit of trouble. But I've always been interested in that intersection of technology and the impacts of technology on various areas. And so, I've been interested in the publishing industry, the music industry, the broader media industry, and most recently, education. And so what is the impact of technology on education? How do we use technology to actually solve the real problems, understand the job to be done, and then use technologies as an enabler to really support our students and our staff to actually achieve that job to be done. So I'll shut up there because I think it's going to be much more interesting to have a conversation, and let's get on with it.
Great, thank you. I guess one of the challenges of the topic that we've got in front of us is when we look at technology enabling student outcomes. Student outcomes is such a broad area that there's no one piece that influences or is responsible for achieving those student outcomes. So I'm sure that across the course over the next 35 minutes or so, we'll touch on a number of different elements. But I think one of the key things I'd like to start off with is we've seen some challenges over the last 18 months, but we've also seen some real innovations and really taking advantage of that opportunity to innovate and change. So it would be great if you're able to talk to some of the examples of what you're involved in currently, where you've seen people really shift either for a particular cohort or across whole organizations to adapt to learners' needs and expectations. Sherman, I might start with you if that's okay.
Yeah, so I'll throw up a few examples, and we'll start at the institution level, and I guess what's really been a good provocation over the last 18 months is thinking about what learning looks like, particularly in universities. It's been quite traditional for a very long time. It's a 1,000-year history, and I've certainly seen pictures of lectures in 1100 which don't look all that different from lectures in 2021, where rows and rows of students, the ones in the back rows, sleeping. So there's a long history and culture of what learning looks like and how it should be delivered. And I think what COVID has done is really accelerate the conversation around, well, is that the best way to learn? Are these the best ways to ensure that our students are actually getting those learning outcomes that they want or they need? And so we've had pretty good conversations around the need to reshape and rethink some of that traditional activity. And certainly we've been pushing the mantra at RMIT that, you know, that kind of didactic content delivery that traditionally sits in the lecture is probably not something that will continue forever. We'd like to see more interesting and more innovative ways, you know, and certainly many of our teaching staff are really thinking about repackaging that content into digestible online opportunities for students to suit the on-demand and, you know, an attention span that really fits that particular student cohort and how they can best engage with that content. And what that does, of course, is frees up the other opportunity, the interactive opportunity for real learning engagement, so that the time that you do spend with the students and can be like real learner to teacher engagement. It can be about questions, it can be about discussion, it can be about all sorts of kind of collaborative activity, which is really where the learning should happen. In that active learning space is real emphasis. So one of the big innovations really is trying to envisage a blended learning framework for the future out of the, I was going to say out of the ashes of COVID, but that's probably preemptive, out of what we've learned from COVID, to really think about, well, okay, we've done this for a long time in one particular way. How do we reshape it to be more student-centric, to be more learner-centric, and really reconsider how we innovate in that space? And that's dependent on, you know, the tech to ensure that the students can get access to the content when they want, where they want. It ensures different types of accessibility for that content in ways that your traditional lecture theatre doesn't, and provides a different platform for learning, if you like. The other one that I thought I'd bring up is the other big one in education is assessment. And we've had to, you know, RMIT traditionally has had big examination periods at the end of each semester where we've had, I think we've hired the showgrounds here in Melbourne and had thousands of students in rows writing their exams. Obviously, with social distancing and COVID, we couldn't do that. So we've had to think very carefully about what assessment looks like. And so there's been a lot of innovation in rethinking and changing the way we consider how to assure that our students meet the learning outcomes. It's a developing space, you know, I'd be lying if I said we've got that problem entirely solved, but there's been a lot of thinking around, okay, what do we do to ensure that learning outcomes are met? How do we do that online? How do we assure, you know, Chris mentioned academic integrity, how do we assure that? How do we redesign our assessment and really think that through? And that I think there's going to be a lot of innovation in that space. There already has. You know, we've been really doing a lot more around authentic assessment and finding ways to encourage our students to engage in activities that are probably more relevant to their future world. But a space that's really ripe for innovation, and we're working along those lines as well.
Yeah, definitely. And we at Open Learning have seen a real shift towards portfolio-based assessments and enabling that peer-to-peer interaction as part of that learning and scaffolded process as well. So completely agree that there's been a jump forward, but there's also continuing work to be done, not just in the continuous improvement side of things, but also in taking staff, you know, your academic and your administration
Absolutely.
staff on that journey as well.
Absolutely. What's that old mantra? You know, like technology is easy, culture is hard. So
Yes.
there's a journey to go, and it's easy, for example, to say, well, okay, we'll replicate the examination on campus with the examination online, and we'll introduce all of these online proctoring tools, et cetera, et cetera. My personal view is that's not the right approach, that this is the opportunity to actually rethink how we do this so that we take advantage of the opportunities that are now emerging rather than just simply, you know, remediate our old activities.
Yeah, definitely. I'd have to agree with you. Chris, what are some of the innovations you've seen more recently? And I think you've already alluded to one of the shifts that Studiosity has made to meet the needs of its partners and learners during the process as well.
You know, look, there's no doubt that COVID has given innovators within the sector a bit more of a license to introduce change. But in the space that we're working in, we've seen innovation going back 5 or 6 years, particularly in relation to student support, and that's been accelerating even before COVID. And I think had a lot of universities pretty well placed actually to handle some of the challenges that COVID threw at them. But probably I'd say going back to maybe 10 years to the Bradley reforms and the widening participation agenda, universities were seeing more students coming to university, more diverse needs, and we're really needing to find new ways to help students in the ways that suited them best. So the innovation has really been in the realms of accessibility. How do we add to the traditional model to make sure that those different cohorts are being supported in the ways that suit them? So 24/7 help, being able to help students after hours, being able to refer students back to those traditional services where they're most appropriate. And the innovation has really been in the integration of our services with the ecosystems of the universities. And related to that, I think, and sort of going back to Sherman's historical sort of analogy, I think one of the trade-offs that we saw with the mass education of populations, probably going back at least a couple of hundred years, and that's accelerated in the last several decades in the tertiary sector, and has had huge benefits for humanity. But one of the trade-offs, I think, is that we've lost an element of personalisation in that process. And we talk a lot about the mass lecture and whether that's still fit for purpose and things like that. So I think we're seeing a lot of innovation that is allowing universities to deliver personalised help at scale. I alluded to the peer-to-peer support. We know that peer support services, well researched, are strongly related to better student outcomes, and being able to amplify the impact of those sort of services by using technology to deliver them at scale is where it's really happening. So personalised learning at scale is a lot of what we're seeing. To use some more specific examples, I guess, and the relationship that we have with RMIT, which is a great one, goes back about 5 or 6 years. I think we first started working with RMIT in 2015. And the focus at that point was particularly on their overseas campuses in Singapore and Vietnam, and the motivation was not just to help students to improve their academic writing skills in particular, but deliver a level of equity. So those students weren't able to access the vast array of services that existed and had been developed over many years in Melbourne for Australian students and students onshore. So there was a motivation to somewhat level the playing field for those students in those offshore campuses, and technology was able to do that. Since then, different agendas have come at play, so that we've rolled out our services to all international students at RMIT, whether they're in offshore campuses or onshore, wherever, and now more recently to all students in RMIT. So all of that's been driven by those factors that I talked about: accessibility, personalisation of support and learning. I'm sure we'll get into some more specific examples as we go, but they're the big themes.
Awesome. Now, Sherman, there's a question for you from one of the participants is, how important is it for students to focus on building the capability to learn and learning to learn as part of their journey?
I think it's critical, in many ways. If that's not the prime graduate attribute, then it probably should be. The reality of the 21st century is that if we stop learning, then it's going to be a real challenge for the entire planet. And so ensuring that our graduates continue to learn and have the capability to continue to learn should be something we're all doing. It's probably happening intrinsically rather than overtly. So there's probably some work we can all do to surface it and highlight it. And I do note, because I'm aware there's a Coursera MOOC, and I think it was called, if I can multitask, I think it was called Learning How to Learn. And I think it's one of the most popular of the Coursera MOOCs, with around 3 million enrollments. So I think people also understand that it's something that they need to be able to do. And when I say it's probably more intrinsic rather than overt, you often get conversations with students. They'll come to you and they say, look, universities are great, but why are you not, teaching me how to use, for example, Adobe Photoshop deeply? Because that's what I need in order to get a job in a design studio. I really need that Adobe Photoshop. And the response from myself would be something like, well, I don't want to teach you Adobe Photoshop. I want to teach you the ability to use any tool and the ability to continue to learn in that design space. And the tool that we might be teaching may not be the one that you use on day one out of university, but you should be able to leave with the skills to use any tool that pops up in your career. And the other analogy, and sorry, Mum, that I'll use is that, you know, I'm tech support for my mother, which is kind of the way many of us are. And she'll ring me up and say, I need to check my email and I can't remember how to do it. And I'll say, well, you go to your dock and you press the mail icon and you click blah, blah. And she'll be writing it down as a list. And she'll have a precise process about what to do in any particular thing. And the reality is, as soon as there's a change in her operating system or her app, she's stuffed. And so what we really need to do as universities is to make sure we're not simply teaching our students the simple, straightforward process, but we're actually providing them the mental mind map, the understanding of the broader context, and the ability to engage with whatever environment they find themselves in, which is probably, I think, something that universities have always done and always positioned themselves to do. And it's something that it exists a little bit in tension with some of the dynamics that, you know, industry and employers might say they want immediately. Not all, because a lot of employers are now saying we actually want those broader skills. And also a little bit in tension with what some students might think they want immediately. So it's a really interesting conversation, but absolutely, that was a really long way of answering yes.
But a great answer, because you gave relevant examples. And even I, you know, when I think back to when I was running vocational and higher education colleges, one of the misconceptions that, you know, I spent a lot of effort trying to break down is just because you're delivering to adult learners, you can't assume that they understand how they learn or practices and support mechanisms to reach out for when they come up against barriers to progression and engagement and that sort of stuff. So just because someone's finished, you know, their primary and secondary school experience doesn't mean they had a great experience, doesn't mean that they've continued to build upon that skill set or have the reflection process and techniques, you know, innately within their repertoire as well. So they're all important things to keep in mind when dealing with any student, I think.
Can I throw in another one? Because this is an interesting conversation. I think the other thing that's really important, and it's relevant to where we are in this session today, is that, you know, a lot of our learning is still predicated on kind of what you might call an information ecosystem, which has gone. You know, we kind of been teaching and thinking about a world where content has been scarce. Where there's been single sources of authority, where, you know, you've been isolated in your discipline or in your profession, and it's all been about words. But, you know, the reality of our current ecosystem, our digital information age, is that, you know, content is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. So it's not about understanding how to engage with a small amount of content. It's about how to engage and curate and plow through and really interrogate vast quantities of information. That's a different skill. It's also harder to understand where authority lies. You know, we really need to educate everyone to work through that contested information, to understand what is valid, what is useful, because, you know, quite frankly, the voices of authority are less clear than they used to be. And it's all multidisciplinary now. You know, having deep knowledge in one area is something that's not probably good enough. I mean, in the last 18 months, we've all become epidemiologists, which is not a good thing. But being able to understand and connect the various pieces of information is really important. And, you know, it's also less about 3,000-word essays. You know, I'm sure that most of our life is all TikTok videos, dare I say it. But that's probably a little bit glib, but the reality is that whole ecosystem, that environment, that reality is quite different. And yet much of what we do in the learning and teaching space is still predicated on those notions of scarcity, authority, isolation, and text. So there is some work to be done, some thinking to be done around how we actually reconceive of what learning should look like in the 21st century. Rant over.
Thanks. So before I come into a question that's been posed for you, Chris, one of the challenges I think at the moment is, you know, we've got Australian education providers that many of whom were already delivering offshore to international students, but obviously that's been heightened through the pandemic as well. The challenge being, or the question being, do you resource that and shift your business model within Australia, or do you also tap into offshore support models? So the question posed is, with your support mechanisms, do you use in-country peers to provide that support, or all of the team members based in Australia?
Yeah, well, before I address that, I just want to add one more thing to that last discussion. Really interesting point about teaching students how to learn. And one of the things that we're seeing I think part of that is showing students or demonstrating to them what good help-seeking behaviour is, because we don't learn in isolation, right? We learn from each other, but quite often it's just encouraging students to take advantage of the communities that they're in and those opportunities. So paradoxically, what we've seen is that some of our university partners said, look, we really need to help this particular group. How do we target those services at X group or Y group? And what we find is actually when all students have equitable access to this sort of tier 0 support, anybody can get help anytime, those students in those target groups, if you like, see everybody behaving that way and saying, well, I'm going to get some feedback on my document, or I'm going to ask for help on this maths question. And we actually see more of those groups that the universities are really looking to target actually start to exhibit those help-seeking behaviours. So I think it's modelling good, healthy help-seeking behaviours is part of that. How do you teach students how to learn? So just interesting angle from our perspective on that idea, I think. In terms of how we support students, the critical element of getting the outcomes that we're driving at, and what are the outcomes? The outcomes are more confident students whose grades are going up, they're becoming more capable, they're being retained at greater rates, they're more satisfied with the experience they're having at university. In order to get those outcomes, what students are looking for is responsiveness. I've got a problem now, I need help now, how can you help me? So we actually have subject specialists for our core literacy and numeracy service located in different parts of the world, all Commonwealth countries. All of our specialists are graduates of universities who are ranked in the top 5% in the world. So high quality, well-educated people who are ready to help. They're in Canada, they're in the UK, they're in Australia, New Zealand. So there's a logistical element to where we put people and where we have them, so that we can have that 24/7 support. And if a student needs feedback on a document, they're getting it back within a few hours. That's really critical. I can't emphasize that enough. Students want fast response. And when they get it, they're more likely to absorb that feedback, apply it straight away, and learn as a result. When it comes to in-country peer support, that is a model that does allow universities to use their own communities. So at the moment, we're talking to a lot of our university partners who are in the situation that was mentioned earlier with students stuck offshore. They just can't be in country. We actually, I don't know what day that Scott Morrison announced that the international flights were being stopped last year, but it was sometime in March. That day, within a couple of hours, we had a phone call from one of our partners saying, is your service accessible in China? We've got about 1,000 students who are not going to be able to get here now for next week's classes. And we were pretty sure it was, and we checked, and it is. And we've seen through the IP addresses of students using our services, they're enrolled in Australian, New Zealand, UK universities, but they're actually accessing our services from China and India and all parts of the world. So the ability to actually tap your own students to help those students, give them a sense that, hey, you still belong to the university. Your help could come from an RMIT student in Melbourne who previously did your unit and knows the content really well. I think that's a really powerful part of the sort of personalisation at scale of support, and not just helping students to be more successful and capable, but helping them to feel as part of that community and have that sense of belonging when they're stuck a long way away.
Yes, definitely. So, which leads me to a question, and I'll give some context in terms of one of the themes that came through in this morning's conversations was that obviously with the shift to online, or a larger proportion of students studying online, when the campuses open back up, many institutions are seeing some students want a blended approach, or actually they're happy to continue online, and that changing expectation as to what does my learning experience look like as part of that. So with that in mind, a key element that we know as part of the learning process, and as an advocate of social constructivism, as a pedagogy and a learning science, is that the community of practice that you learn with as part of that is really key for both engagement and enhancing the outcomes for students. How do you ensure that in an online environment and the programs that you're developing and delivering?
I guess that one's for me, is it, Cherie?
Yeah, and then I guess that's also, it leads into, what intersection Studiosity has and the feedback loop they provide to providers to support that process as well.
Yeah, look, it's actually a question that's very much front of mind for me, because I think that social learning aspect, learner connection, if you like, is in that, dare I say it, is not done hugely well in some of our big mainstream platforms. So finding ways to enable it in the infrastructure we have can be challenging. We have been exploring some technical solutions and different areas. So I guess we're, if we look at what we've done with COVID, there's been a little bit of piece where a lot of the tools which we use for that sort of engagement have emerged out of video conferencing technologies, kind of like this, which are probably designed for different types of engagements rather than classroom types engagements. And yeah, you can do breakout rooms and you can do various types of facilitated activities, but it's probably a little bit clunky. So what we're seeing emerge in some of it's out of the startup community are some tools that actually are designed to solve the problem, rather than adapting other tools, and we've been piloting some of those to see what can be done. Having said that, as I said, the technology is only part of the solution. The other part of it is really the professional development to ensure that our teachers can facilitate in those online spaces in a way that perhaps was more natural on campus. So we've rolled out a fairly significant blended learning professional development suite, if you like, and we're certainly encouraging all of our academic and teaching staff to roll through that professional development, because it's critical that the skills and capabilities of the teaching staff are really reflect exactly what you're saying. It's not just about taking the lecture content recorded and putting it on Canvas. There is way more to it, and thinking about how to encourage the various dimensions of learning in the classroom is certainly something that we're doing at that professional development level as well. I might pause there and let Chris jump in.
Well, look, I mean, I guess again, our perspective is from the student support angle, and one of the more powerful principle, I guess, that we help to bring to bear is this idea of formative feedback. And it goes back to that personalization question again, I think. So we know that students learn, or anyone learns, whether it's acquiring new knowledge or a new skill. The more opportunities you have to practice that or demonstrate that knowledge, get some feedback, apply the feedback, and iterate that process, the more quickly you learn. So bringing that sort of opportunity back into the classroom, and a lot of the work that we do with our university partners is to look for ways to integrate the sum of all the parts so that you get a even amplified outcome. So for example, the work we do can be married with the work that academics are doing in the classroom. And there are quite a few examples of this. One, for example, where it was a unit of over 1,000 students enrolled in a STEM subject. I think it was like biology or something like that. So students very capable in STEM, but not so much in their academic writing abilities. So that academic actually built into the curriculum the formative feedback process. Here's the assignment. You need to write this report. Here's when it's due. At this date, we want you to put your first draft into the writing feedback service, get that feedback, incorporate it into your report, and then submit your report. And by the way, submit the feedback that you got as well, so that we can see how you've applied that. So taking some of these digital services and melding them into that face-to-face classroom experience to amplify the impact. So that's one example, I guess, of how we work with academics and the universities to integrate the services that we're we're providing.
And just kind of adding to that, Chris, I mean, that's obviously something that works really well in your platform. For me, what would be interesting is to include a peer review cycle into that, so that it's not just feedback from, you know, advisors and teachers, but from peers, and something in the task which actually is developmental around that peer review. And then I think that would provide some of the connections that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I think perhaps what stopped that sort of thing in the past is those limitations on scale for those very big units. But now we're overcoming those, and I think it's very possible to do that.
Yeah, definitely. That's great to hear. And, you know, really interested to hear about the professional development side of things. I think it comes back to, we've touched point on the importance of change management and upskilling for staff as well as students through that process. And it's a balancing act, I think, as part of it. You know, one of the questions we often get is, or concerns is, in the shift to online, that educators will lose the ability to identify those at-risk students, you know, when they're not getting things or they're falling behind and that sort of stuff. And we've had a couple of great success stories where those initial concerns, when you work through that journey process and actually iteratively build on it, intake after intake, that the feedback that then comes through is, it's awesome because, one, I can more easily identify when a student's falling behind. Students who are quite often reluctant to put their hand up and say, I'm not getting it in a face-to-face environment, have mechanisms to reach out for help outside of the scheduled live sessions as well. So there is definitely some benefit to the new world that we live in on scale as well.
I think you're absolutely right, Shireen. What's interesting is that you know, we have way more data now. We can see, you know, click streams in our LMS. We can see, you know, on some platforms we can see, you know, in the classroom whether students are actually engaging or not. And we've got way more data. And I think it's also interesting that, you know, I remember way back when I first started looking at some of the tools that were actually hybrid. So you'd have a live lecture activity and then there'd be activities happening online simultaneously. There was always really interesting back channel conversations between students that were far more incisive and far more informative than the formal mechanisms that you might give them. And I think having the ability to have a much more holistic picture around student engagement is fantastic. We probably aren't as systematic about it as we should be, but the ability and the opportunity is there to build and develop that capability and capacity without being creepy.
Yes, that's a good point to make, but I think you're not alone in that challenge. You know, if we look at the amount of data and access we've got to the data across everything from pre-enrollment through to post-graduation now, it's a wealth of information. It's then how do you pull that picture together, not just at an institution level or at a student level, but making it accessible and meaningful for those people supporting the student through the cycle as well. So it's an iterative process. And one of the questions that I often ask when working with partners, you know, the question we get is, what data can I see? It's what metrics are you looking to actually engage with? Because that then indicates what you define as an engaged student and an at-risk student, and what success looks like for the program as a whole as well. I'm conscious of time because we've only got 5 minutes left. So I think one of the pieces that has come up, or questions that's come up in the comments, is how do you build learning experiences that support the development of employability skills such as higher quality communication, peer-to-peer, you know, engagement, negotiation skills, feedback as well. Can you give us some insights as to what you think has worked in some of the courses that you've developed, Sherman?
Yeah, so I mean, they're intrinsically part of hopefully the program learning outcomes and course learning outcomes that our programs will have. That ability to communicate, you know, cascades down from the graduate attributes, et cetera, But I guess where we see great success is in the work integrated learning space, and the ability to ensure that there's an authenticity around the activity, and that authenticity can be, you know, a placement or an internship. with appropriate kind of scaffolding and preparation. Or it could be an engagement with an employer on campus or online, where a problem is set. It may be a simulation, etc. So whilst it's pretty straightforward to set a comms task as part of meeting that course learning outcome, and have students do presentations as part of what they do, I think that authenticity around the work integrated learning piece just adds that extra dimension, and provides some quality engagement that the students really are striving for. I know that data from a previous institution was that when we had successful work integrated learning experiences, the data around graduate outcomes lifted substantially. So I think there's value in authenticity and really finding relevance for the activity, as well as simply putting them in the formal kind of learning outcome structures.
Yeah, great, thank you. Chris, I'm going to hand over to you now in terms of one final question before we wrap up is, what do you think we should be amplifying in education innovation, and how do we actually do it? So we can probably solve in 3 minutes, please.
Yeah, no problem. So look, I think amplify is a perfectly apt word to use. And I alluded to those principles that we know that work, that personalized one-to-one help, formative feedback, the ability to practice and get better. We know that when someone's learning something and they get stuck and they lose confidence because they can't progress, that's a real barrier to learning. So we overcome that by giving them access to people who can help them right in that moment. So amplifying those principles and the impact of those principles by giving students more choices, more in different ways to get that help. That's how we go about it. It's only 5 years ago that there are probably a few tens of thousands of students in Australia that had that on-demand sort of help through the university. It's over 1 million today in Australia. And I think it's not out of the question to say that in 5 years' time, it'll be every student in every school and every university that's able to tap that sort of support on demand. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to. So that's going to amplify the impact of all of those principles that we know that work really well, and really radically level the learning playing field. It's a really exciting thing to be involved in. And we're seeing it happen right now before our eyes. So that's my very quick response, given the time that you've given me.
Great, thank you. I think you touched on an important piece there. It is enabling access and equity for learners, regardless of where they are as well, which is key and really important. Sherman, do you have anything to add to that last question about how we amplify education innovation?
Look, one of the kind of catchphrases I often use is that the technologies and the environment we're living in makes the invisible visible. And so we now can see and experience and understand way better what some of our students need and how best to engage them. And I think the challenge for us is to take that learning and actually make things better. So for better student experience, better student engagement, and better learning outcomes for our students, knowing that every student has their own story and different expectations. And so I think that level of personalization that Chris talks about is important. It's not a one size fits all for everybody, and finding a way to really ensure that our students can navigate the complexities of higher education is critical.
Awesome, thank you. Oh, look at that. I was just about to preempt before David pops in and tells me to wrap up, and here he is.
Somebody's thinking you don't even have to say anything now with this modern world. We can just automatically plug straight into the neural network and work out that you were about to call me on. Thanks very much, Cherie, Chris, and Sherman. It's been a great conversation. And the idea of being able to use online tools to actually ensure that students are engaged in their work and are actually delivering the learning outcomes you expect is fantastic and really exciting. Thanks for the fantastic conversation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Our next session really starts to think about how we reinvent an entire education sector in a very short period of time. And Katie Taylor is going to be moderating the session for us. And Katie leads the development and articulation of Navitas's public policy and advocacy positions for the organisation. She works to connect colleagues, partners, and other stakeholders with opportunities, ideas, and insights. She contributes to Navitas' strategic global insights and data analytics capability. She joined Navitas in 2016, having previously spent a decade and a half with the Commonwealth Public Service. Thanks so very much for agreeing to partner and moderate this session for us, Katie.
Very welcome, David. Thanks to EduGrowth for having me. I'm looking forward to this session.
Fantastic. I can hear you, I can see you, everything is good, so I'll hand over to you.
Fabulous. That's what we like. Hi, everybody. Good. Thank you for joining us this morning. In our session, we're joined by two fabulous colleagues, the first of which is Brett Blacker. So Brett will be known to many of you. He's the Chief Executive Officer of English Australia, the national peak body, of course, for English language teaching sector. Brett has previously held a range of roles within universities at Murdoch University and Newcastle University, but has also had a breadth of experience in other sectors such as the insurance and health sectors, where he was the General Manager for Health and overseas student health cover at Allianz Worldwide Partners. So welcome, Brett.
Hello, thank you, Katie. Lovely to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brett. It's like you zoom in. It's amazing. It's right on cue. Here we are. Our colleagues, our other guest this morning is Jake Foster. Jake is the Chief Commercial Officer with AECC Global. He's held a range of leadership roles in business throughout his time and has a real innovation bent and organisational change. So he has a strong focus on employing technology in projects to support in his current role, the journey of international students, particularly around the application journey. He's very passionate about what we do in international education and indeed about access for students to education from around the world. Previously, Jake's worked across a number of teams in Australia in business operations, not only here in Oz, but also in Southeast Asia and China. So welcome, Jake.
Thanks very much, Katie, and thanks very much to EduGrowth for having us here today as well. Very exciting to be with you all.
Brilliant. So, colleagues, I'd like to kick off and for you guys to each reflect on what you've each seen in your organisation about, you know, what your organisations look like pre-pandemic. So let's say pre-February 2020, and what they look like now. Some of the key sort of differences that you've observed. And obviously, Brett, you're probably not only going to speak from your own organisations, but from the perspective of your members. So maybe to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I think with everyone, you know, that would be part of this this conference over this week, it's been a year or more, year and 18 months, I guess, of extreme change. I guess looking at it from two perspectives, English Australia in our role as the peak body for the English language teaching sector, there's been an enormous change in the way in which our advocacy has been focused on the support and assistance that our member colleges and the sector has required. The way in which our services are delivered in professional development, and particularly the pace of information that was needed, particularly to support the transition, the initial transition from purely face-to-face teaching into digital and online delivery modes. And within our market intelligence, there's been, again, a shift in the rapid pace to which people want to know what's happening across the sector and different metrics that are being measured. Another role in that is certainly our more recent one and attuned with this conference and administering the Innovation Grants Program in partnership with the Department of Education, Skills and Employment, sort of wraps up another key attribute of new, different activity that our association is working with since the pandemic unfortunately started. On the provider level, the pace of change, and I think even in the bio description for this session, noted 10 years of innovation in 12 months. And I think we sort of coined a phrase early that it was around 10 years of innovation in the first 10 days. We've probably had the next 10 years of innovations been really in that engagement piece. And from what we saw transitioning from almost into emergency online digital teaching and delivery due to necessity, to now innovative practices and a real focus on the quality of the service delivered. As some of the other earlier sessions have looked at, the student engagement in the way in the learning process happens, and now mapping that and looking at ways to improve what at the moment it's the I guess the primary focus on how do we try and continue to operate, and certainly online remote teaching has a big part to play.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brett. So Jake, just reflecting on AECC Global, what did you guys look like pre-pandemic, and what do you look like now, and what's that journey been like for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Katie. So just for everyone's, AECC Global is a student recruitment agency, and we have about 500 team members in 35 offices in 12 different countries. And we work with universities not only in Australia and the world, including Canada, the US, the United States, of course, the United Kingdom, and a number of countries. We saw some massive changes as a result. It's difficult, sort of, I said to Brett before and Katie, we've been, since the 1st of April, it's been 505 days. And in Victoria, we've had 200 days of lockdown. So 505 days we've been at that time in lockdown. So what has that meant for us and for our involvement in the sector? Well, we saw a massive impact on the number of students looking to study, especially in markets like Australia. And that had a huge effect on our university partners, difficult. And of course, not just university partners, our English foundation program partners all across the entire sector, sort of a ripple effect. And I was looking at the numbers of student visa grants, especially in the English and foundation sectors in Australia just yesterday. And the fall in those numbers has been really staggering. And I guess what that means is that students are not getting the opportunity to study in markets like Australia if they're not here. Thankfully, it's been really encouraging to see such a huge number of international students choosing to stay in Australia throughout the pandemic. Other effects that we saw, things that happened as a result of the pandemic, included our rapid adapting to online. So students started studying online. Our consultants and counsellors started meeting. All of our events that we used to go to face-to-face with our students and our university partners went online overnight. So I said to someone recently, what we've seen in the last sort of 12 to 18 months sort of thing is 5 years of technology development in that period in such a quick time. And no doubt we've seen all of our university partners having to rapidly adapt as well. So digital transformation has been huge for us. Supporting our clients and really keeping the lines of communication open has been really important as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Jake. So you guys each sort of started touching on this a little bit in your first remarks, but of the innovations that have really come to the fore in the last, say, 18 months, what are the things do you think you and your members, from Brett's perspective, you guys are going to hold on to? What are the things that are going to last longer than just this, as you say, sort of this emergency, we've had to do this, versus, we want to do this? So maybe, Jake, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what's certainly going to change, or what's going to last from this, is the digital transformation that has already happened, and that will continue to happen. Internally, we've been building platforms. So everything we used to do on face-to-face meetings and via email, we've now built platforms to facilitate everything. So from start to finish. In the next month or so, we're launching a new platform that's sort of been a number of years in the making that will allow students to basically do a full application on the internet. And of course, we're having face-to-face touch points, Zoom touch points, but basically we've been trying to make the whole process of enrolling and applying to study abroad easier for our students. And the feedback we're getting from our students that are using our testing platforms at the moment is really positive. So I think that will certainly happen. And also, I think there will be a more permanent shift to students studying offshore as well. Although I think that will still be, before COVID, we didn't really see students studying online offshore, and I still think that that will be attractive for some students, although not the majority.
I'm going to pick up on that a bit later, but thanks for that, Jake. Brett, to you, what do you think English Australia, but also English Australian members will keep and really evolve, in fact, actually out of the innovations that have come from the 18 months of a pandemic?
Yeah, Katie, I mean, we obviously, I think for us, when looking at what that future looks like, I think it's going to be actually a combination of what existed previously, and in many ways the former in-country face-to-face teaching mode, and remembering pre-pandemic, all of the English language instruction required the 20 hours face-to-face delivery, and so there was no element within the regulatory framework that allowed for the use of the online teaching within that mandatory hours. Obviously anything above that was okay, but not within that 20 hours. And I guess there's a view that in some ways the rationale around the intensivity of ELICOS teaching requires that face-to-face mode. I think that's being tested, and we're actually probably, due to the duration that we're having a sustained period of the pandemic, we're actually going to be able to road test that a lot more. And I think some of the historical assumptions around students' ability to progress, it would have taken a lot longer and probably more questionable research if we didn't have this real live test case that we have now around the ability for students to acquire their language proficiency through digital and online modes, and in a mix of delivery platforms. We saw initially the early transition was to keep teaching in the same mode, so to deliver the 20 hours as you would have done face-to-face, but just revert that into online classrooms, via Zoom and other platforms. Now, teaching again 20 hours, there's been a lot of lessons learnt around what the capacity for the student to learn is, how long they can engage. But I think moving forward, we're going to see a model which a lot of the investment made into online platforms now and the success in being able to prepare students offshore, in addition to potentially what's being sort of coined as that high flex model or hybrid model, a combination of both the face-to-face teaching and online. I sort of think we're not going to revert back to where we were, and we probably won't stay where we're at now, but a combination of all three things will become more of sort of consumer options. We just need to work through in the next period towards the way in which the pandemic goes to how we can ensure quality in the service delivery across each of those potentially three different options.
Yeah, marvellous. Thanks, Brett. And obviously there is a regulatory lens to that as well that we might pick up on later in the discussion too. Colleagues, the audience, if you do have any questions as we are running through this conversation, please do put it in the live chat question stream there. I'll pick them up and direct them to either Jake or Brett or both. So please feel free to do that as we're going through. In the meantime, guys, I think it might be good just to do a bit of a scene set now too of where we are as a sector in, August 2021. A bit of a cast back, current state, but also looking at what the sector will be like, say, in the next 6 or 12 months' time. And Brett, you are an aficionado when it comes to, the key statistics of your sector. So maybe if you could lead off on that. But also, I know that, you're a really engaged colleague in the broader sector. So you might want to speak also to beyond ELICOS, what's higher ed and vet and indeed schools looking like in that broader sort of macro context, Brett?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I guess in terms of the data piece in itself, the picture's not great at the moment in terms of students and actual student commencements. We English Australia have had a lot of support from the Department of Education, Skills and Employment over many years around surveys which we undertake on the sector to look at what the performance is, not just of those students on student visas, but some of the unique metrics within English language teaching of the non-student visa holder here on visitor, working holiday or other visa types. and the duration of that study. Now, 2020 was obviously an abnormal year, and you know, we at the English language sector, you know, faced the brunt. But even if you cast back, student visas down 43% at the end of last year, whole of sector, incorporating the other students that weren't, you know, able to arrive, it was down 47%. Moving forward to where we are in June 2021, and already in the student visa position, we've seen a 61% decline on top of what was already, you know, 24% last year. And I don't want to keep on with just those percentage numbers, but you know, in real terms, it's a dire situation. And even at that mid-year point, you know, we are almost 27,000 students less now than this time last year, which is over 7,000 more than the higher education sector. Just quickly, this week we're releasing an economic impact report which showed ELICOS alone, the losses were around 1.2 billion in 2020, just in terms of the direct costs for the sector, and flowing into 2021 in the 1 year of lost students arriving, that equated to another 1.5 billion, and almost $1 billion of that, 980 million, directly into higher education and subsequent economic impact in 2021. Katie, I think at the moment, sort of the projections baked into the budget process were around international arrivals at mid-year 2022. We're all hopeful that the terrible situation we're faced in by this prolonged lockdown, if anything, the silver lining is the actual rate of vaccination, and to the extent that I think the pathway for international arrivals coming sooner than mid 2022 to any great capacity will rely on that vaccination level. So through the remainder of this year, you know, numbers will continue to decline, and we've sort of seen that 60% sort of area running through the last number of months. On the positive note, if there is one, last year in terms of EdTech, the number of students studying online migrated from what was, you know, in the initial quarter, the last back end of March, 1%, up to 50% of the students studying ELICOS were online and offshore. And that's carried through. We're about to release our Q2 data, but in the first quarter of 2021, it was 47% of the students across the reported survey, and this is about 90 leading English language colleges, so it's a very valid sample, showed that around 47% of those students were actually engaged in their study online. And so that ability to pivot, even at small numbers, certainly has given, I guess, some opportunity, and through the Innovation Grants program, we hope that that's going to really expand that from what's been predominantly in the higher education pathways, English for academic pathways market, to try and look at more opportunities in general English and across the private sector, which we're seeing some great initiatives sort of being planned at the moment. So hesitate to put a number term in terms of the crystal ball, but you know, I think that's probably what we're looking at, and really hoping the runway, once we know vaccination levels improve and that there is border opening may be sort of part of that government election announcement, that we'll be able to get a runway to enable, I guess, an increase in visa processing or applications and visa processing.
Oh, wonderful. And actually, there's been a question come through about willingness to travel and the interest, if you like, demand from the students. But I'll come back to that. Jake, over to you first, just to sort of, reflect on any sort of, I suppose from the agent, perspective, what's your sector looking like, and you know, the characteristics of it, even the numbers potentially, and where you see your part of our sector sort of moving to in the next sort of 6-12 months.
Thanks, Katie. Certainly things have changed dramatically, and unfortunately not in favour of we have never seen any of our applicants. We've got Office East Asia choosing markets like study destinations rather, like the United Kingdom or Canada before. seeing all of Canada's becoming a study, that the United Kingdom's becoming a study destination of choice. That said, we're very, very positive about the rebound of Australia when the borders reopen. So one of the questions I saw was, are students not choosing to come to Australia because they can't, well, are they choosing not to study online or not choosing Australia as a destination because they don't want to come here because the borders are closed? And we did an internal survey of many of our, well, the majority of our 300-400 counsellors. And the feedback was that the key factors that students take on board that are important to students, cost of living savings, scholarships, reduced fees for online programs, and of course, safety during COVID. And that said, we've already started to engage with a number of our university partners about Australia and its reopening, hopefully sort of early to mid next year. And obviously, Brett, you know, I sort of echo his comments. It'll be hopeful that we see some really positive political movements there in terms of borders reopening. But certainly, it's going to be an interesting for the entire higher education sector. So I guess that we have to our university partners at the moment is that we are really, really positive about Australia reopening and our student numbers rebounding. All you have to do is speak to students that are already in Australia. And I speak with a number of students. I'm very lucky to speak to a number of students. And I spoke to one of them who really sort of struggled. He followed a specific migration pathway and the entire migration system sort of come to a halt. And he'd done his bachelor's, he'd done his master's. And I said to him, what's your plan? And this student had come here planning to go back to his country and then fell in love with Australia. And he said, well, I don't want to go to Canada or the United Kingdom because it's too cold. So there are a number of factors in Australia that make it a really attractive place to study. And once our borders reopen, we're really confident that we'll see a strong rebound in students choosing Australia as a study destination once again.
Awesome, Jake. Actually, I might just take a bit of license and moderate it and add to those two responses, particularly around the demand, because as many of you may know, Navitas has been doing a series of surveys of our agents, and the latest one, we started this in May of last year. We did one in September in 2020, and then again in March, 2021. So, and we've seen this interesting shift, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, agents, and as a proxy, obviously, for students and parents, were giving a lot of credit to places like New Zealand and Australia in terms of their management of the COVID pandemic. We were being rated really highly in terms of our safety and our security and our, just our general sort of, safety and our response to the pandemic. As time has gone on, and it was evident in September, but very, very pronounced come March, was that, and we have this really interesting sort of question that we ask, this two-stage question. Has this country's become a more attractive option in the last couple of months based on safety and security? And then the next question we ask is around openness and welcoming, being open and welcoming. And of the resounding response from agents has been that destinations that seem to be open and welcoming, i.e. those that you can actually access, like Canada and the UK, have been really, really attractive to students, and echoing what, Jake, you were sort of saying in your organisation at the coalface. But interestingly, there does also become then, when you drill down into some of that data, there's some differences by source region. And so we see particularly students from South Asia and, the subcontinent being very driven, as we know there have been, by migration outcomes. And so, and also the health situation, say in India and other places in South Asia, not being so great, that they're willing to, and their parents are willing to let them travel to places like the UK and Canada that have, in the past been experiencing high levels of, infections, etc. In Southeast Asia and to a lesser extent North Asia, the parents and students themselves are less likely to travel, and we're actually seeing them hold back a little bit in terms of actually leaving their countries. And so that's why online is still holding up really well for the China market, for example, here in Australia. The other thing that our agent survey shows is that Australia remains a really attractive offer once you can access the country. So we do see a lot of pent-up demand coming in to Australia once we have the ability to safely and, you know, also at scale, open our borders. So yeah, thanks for letting me have that little spruik on Navitas's agent work. We've had another couple of questions come through, colleagues, and thanks, Douglas. It's great to hear that you're online. I assume it's the Douglas that I'm thinking of, but he says it's great to reconnect with colleagues on this session, which it is. He asked, though, to what extent do we think that will Ellicott sector and others need to rebuild their social license here in Australia post-pandemic? So maybe, Brett, to you first on that one, because you've done a lot of thinking, I know, in this space.
Thanks, Katie, and likewise, hello to Douglas. It's a great question in social license, and I think there's a lot of thought happening around this, particularly with the relaunch or the launch of the new national strategy as well, the 21-2030 national strategy, and this exact question around community perceptions and social license. It's a key attribute to student experience, student engagement, on top of the academic learning experience. I think it provides, if anything, this reset period at the moment provides a really strong opportunity to how we do rebuild that social license, or in some ways, I might even hesitate to say how we build it, because I think we've not historically held probably the position that we've necessarily needed to. It's been interesting to see, in different ways in which the support mechanisms that we've given, and I think Australia's done well in terms of trying to support the current cohort of students in Australia. But even more recently, the way in which they've had more open access to employability and whilst they're here. So that connection between our students and labour forces is key. One thing that I have seen and witnessed through this period has been the interconnectedness that we've started to have with other sectors. Certainly from our perspective, English Australia, we far more frequently engage with the tourism sector in actual open dialogue. We've got memorandums in place now with Australian Tourism Export Council, and just at our roundtable meeting, the international roundtable meeting just 2 weeks ago, we had Qantas come and present, so those different allied industries which may not necessarily get initial cut through in terms of the Australian community can become really influential allies to how we start to show the interconnectedness of students, the international student community here, and not just in terms of the economic value, but the way in which we are, I guess, more a connected community. So I think without being able to probably nail the $1 million question of rebuilding, I do think there are stepping stones within the national strategy refresh or release under a new period, and in which the way our alliances are formed, which I think could really serve us well to build the community social license that we need.
Yeah, fantastic, Brett. Thank you. And Jake, I'll just ask you maybe to address just off, in your reflections, Douglas, the second part of that question, because he sort of is pointing to something that I think, in fact, Minister Tudge points to, which is how the narrative around EdTech can be folded into the narrative around social license. And I think if I could, just before I call on you to make some reflections, I think Minister Tudge's sort of thinking around this is that there is both a really attractive product in students coming to Australia, but there's also a product and real high demand for online offshore learning that, and I think some of the reason he's doing that is, again, to sort of rebuild or build, as Brett has indicated, that social license here without the Australian electorate. But what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's been a lot of dialogue, especially from Minister Tudge, about students choosing to study Australian education online, offshore, and continuing to do so after the pandemic. And while we see that as something that will grow in the future, and it's an important thing for institutions to focus on, we know what's tried and tested, and that has worked for our onshore experience. And Australian universities have been some of the best at the world at delivering those amazing experiences, as have colleges, ELICOS providers across the sort of the whole gambit of the industry. So I think it's really important that the government is supportive of both, especially what's tried and tested and what employs so many people in Australia, not just in the sector itself, but all of the other suppliers that support the industry as well, the accommodation providers, the insurers, the whole industry as a whole. At the same time, there's certainly that new growing focus on what we can deliver to students that can't quite come into Australia. They maybe can't afford it, or they're looking for an at-home experience. And I think certainly the pandemic has been sort of brought that forward many. We know markets like China, students are much more willing to study online offshore. And I think what's really important is to come up with and to continue to improve that online offshore offering without cannibalizing our onshore market, as well as pricing it accordingly. Some of the big things that we know students are looking for when they're studying online is a different price point. They like the cost of living savings. And so it's all a bit of a balance. And I think it's really important that one isn't favoured over the other. And I certainly think if anything should be favoured, it's rebuilding our existing framework and our industry that has worked and Australians and add so much diversity and value to the Australian economy and the whole Australian education ecosystem. And secondly, focus on that new growing piece over time. But that's not going to happen overnight. And there's big question marks as to how big that market is and how it's going to develop over time. So I think that's certainly something to keep.
Thanks, Jake. Actually, that's a really good segue into something else we wanted to pick up in this conversation, and that is around, and you sort of pointed to it in some of your earlier remarks, but with these new cohorts of learners, we're probably going to need different channels to reach them. And particularly we're going to need some support from channel partners such as agents, that we've historically relied on as providers to connect providers with this new segment, if you like, of the market. And the other interesting thing I think about these online offshore, cohorts of students is, and it would be the perfect world, and I think an amazing offer, but how do we make that an actual reality for people is connecting online learning with jobs and industries and employers in where they are studying, so to probably their home countries or a third country. Have you guys done any thinking at AECC Global about some of that?
About helping students
and leveraging the online learning as well, connecting online learning and the jobs market in their home country.
Yeah, absolutely. It's early days for us, but we're also looking at supporting a number of institutions on the ground in the countries where we have so many offices already. So traditionally, our key focus has always been overseas education, and we're looking more and more at options within the countries in which we operate around Southeast Asia. That focus is still very much higher education, studying abroad. One of the things we are doing, and we've just introduced recently, is something called AECC Skills. And essentially every single student that comes into the AECC ecosystem, we are running a personality test. This is just something we've released in the last week or so. We're running a personality and a career assessment, working out potential career pathways for these students. So before they even study abroad with our university partners, we're already talking to them about career outcomes at the very beginning. And whether those career outcomes be in the destination country that they're choosing to study in or their home country, we're having some of those discussions. Although at the end of the day, it's entirely up to the students. And what they decide at the start of a 4 or 6 year study abroad journey might be very different at the end of that journey. And we've had students that have come to us from other countries and they've studied and they've said, I've had an amazing time, but I want to go home to be with my family and perhaps work back in their home country. the culture of Australia, the sort of lively pre-pandemic country that we were, and they want to stay here and be part of the economy. And they're such an important contributor to our skilled migration program as well, which we've seen so sort of brutally cut off in such a recent times as there's such labour shortages. So certainly we have discussions with students about their careers before they leave their.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jake. There's another question here that was actually directed to you that now has gone off my screen. I'm not sure if the organisers can bring it back up for me around the ability of, yeah, thank you. This is the one I was looking for. Curriculum and learning cultures and differences and actually how the differences that we observe obviously in the classroom, does that also sort of come through on the online learning platforms? Maybe to give you a bit of a break, Jake, I'll actually throw to Brett first on that one and you can add anything at the back end.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, to be honest, the one in terms of, when I spoke about the transition initially to the way in which our delivery was happening, one of the challenges was trying to moderate around different time zones and engage students, particularly those that weren't in Australia, obviously in lockdown and learning online, while still continuing their studies in Australia. But part of the proposition around English language teaching has always been around the diversity of the classroom, and the sector itself represented the most diverse student cohorts in that framework. And schools had diversification strategies and policies in place before it was cool to do so, because it actually did enhance the learning experience. I think the student engagement process, full stop. Now whether that's looking at how you bring in cultural learning into that space, it's still, there's a progression in the ways in which we're engaging students in the learning experience to tell them about themselves or where they are. But there is still a really strong appetite. When we talk about innovation in this space, I mean, I know of providers, or particularly one example I can call on, who are running a really successful online homestay program for people that, similar to the study tour experience, are just acutely interested in having that cultural experience. And when I first went back and reflected on it, I was like, how would a student want to engage in a homestay program if they were still offshore? But you think back, historically, when there were like pen pals and people would write a letter to someone that they didn't know on the other side of the world in hope that they would receive a letter back to learn a bit more about that cultural experience. And we've just amplified that in terms of the way in which technology can bring somebody into their own home and still give lessons and life lessons to the youth and others that want to see and experience another culture. So I think that as we progress along the way in terms of delivery to different cohorts online, and the way in which hybrid and technology is being used to bring different cultural experiences, I think we will be able to embed that more. As I mentioned, we're now 18 months on, and the focus now isn't just about the delivery of the content, it is around that student experience and student engagement. So I think the opportunity is still there to improve, but it's certainly a centerpiece of how we do the delivery now.
Marvellous. Thanks, Brett. Jake, did you want to add anything to that, sort of the curriculum, the pedagogy, transition online versus in class?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And also to Vipin as well, his question was around the Australian curriculum and learning of the culture. Is it challenging for students? And I gather there might be some students even today's session. So for those students, welcome, and we hope you choose Destination Australia. And if you're offshore, please be patient. We promise you in the future, we're not sure when, but at some stage, the borders. So to Viplav's question, I would say that the Australian curriculum it takes a little time, depending on where the students come from, but it's not really the curriculum, the individual course that you're choosing. So if you're choosing a course that you think is well suited for you, then chances are, after a little bit of onboarding, it'll be something that you can navigate very reasonably. And our providers are some of the best in the world, and we're so proud to partner with institutions not only in Australia but around the world. But I can certainly say from personal experience, having studied at multiple Australian universities, that Australian universities, VIPLab, are world-class, as are our ELICOS providers and providers across the entire vocational and higher education sector. So VIPLab, if the question was, are you choosing to study in Australia? Be patient. We'd love you to come and join us in Australia. And with regards to your question, Katie, online versus on campus, I think it's going to be certainly universities and our higher education providers have already made some huge leaps forward. And I think it's really exciting to see the amount of interest in the EdTech space and the amount of innovation. And what we saw 2-3 years ago and what we're going to see in 2-3 years is going to be completely different. And learning experiences are going to continue to be completely overhauled and revamped in the years ahead, and we're really for as to what that means for students and the fact that that will improve student experiences, and I think that's an inherently positive thing for the entire sector.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Jake. We've just got one question here from Geeta, and it goes to this point about, I suppose, a differentiation of markets and indeed cost. So they ask, is it how expensive is it going to be for overseas students? And I'm taking that, I'm interpreting that as moderator to sort of say, what's the price? Is it, what are we seeing emerge in terms of online as a product and not just, if you like, in this transition phase for when we hope to welcome students back, but the longer term online offering versus the onshore, immersed in the culture, immersed in campus, etc. Sort of pricing differentiation. I won't ask either of you to put a price tag on it, but just maybe 30 seconds of observation, because I do want to ask our final question before our session finishes in a few minutes. So maybe Brett, you first quickly on that cost point.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there's going to be cost options and choice, and it will sort of relate to that level of, I think, human interaction and digital intervention that people want to go in online space. I mean, if you look back even pre-pandemic, we did studies looking at sort of the opportunity to introduce standalone ELICOS programs into China, and what we uncovered was there was this whole gamut of opportunities for quite top shelf, really expensive face-to-face one-on-one tutorial and learning experiences being offered in China as it was. And then there was a whole stream of programs right down to high volume online low touch point courses. So I think it's difficult to put a price for one course, and as we go through and look at those different models, be it the sort of onshore, in-country, in-class, the hybrid high flex model, which includes face-to-face personal tuition as well as synchronous and asynchronous delivery, to more of an online self-directed learning experience, which components of the language can be taught. I think there's still an element of interaction needed. You'll get different price points along that. Teaching costs and infrastructure are still quite high. So I think that's where we start to see the moderation of costs depending on product choice.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I'm actually going to hold there. And as a political junkie, I was hoping to take over Barry Cassidy's job on Insiders, but unfortunately David Spears beat me to the job. But I would like to ask each of you, just in our last minute, so 30 seconds from Jake, 30 seconds from Brett, in wrapping up this session, which has been marvelous, so thanks for the opportunity to participate. What do we think we need to do to really amplify education innovation as we go forward? What are one or two really sort of concrete things we can do as a sector to do that? So firstly to Jake.
Thanks, Katie. That's a tricky question, actually. What can we do to amplify the sector? I think what we need to continue to do is celebrate innovation and excellence in innovation. And also, I think innovation is, in this sector, it's critical that it's obviously driving commercial outcomes as well. So it has to go hand in hand. But I think the best thing everyone can do when it comes to innovating, and what we've tried to do at AECC Global, is really communicate with our students and our counsellors and the people at the coalface, if you like, the educators, when you're talking with regards to higher education providers as well, and listen. Listen. Learn about what students are looking for, learn about what educators are looking for, and really take that on board and solve problems. Innovation, good innovation solves problems, and that's what everyone should be aiming to do.
No, marvellous. Great advice. Thank you, Jake. Brett, your 30-second final observation about how we amplify innovation in our sector.
Yeah, and I think Jake nailed it in terms of really aiming for excellence, and at the heart of it, it's the student experience. Whatever we can do to really support the student and engage the student, I think that'll serve us well in terms of how we can amplify innovation. And I know that technology can do that, and in ways we probably never thought of or imagined. So yeah, my focus would be on just keeping at heart the focus on the student experience and the student being engaged in the process.
That's marvellous. Again, fantastic advice. I think, David, that's a wrap for us for this session.
There you go, perfect timing. So yeah, absolutely, guys. Thank you so very much for giving us a deep dive insight into it's the only session we're doing actually at the Melbourne EdTech Summit, which is talking about the pandemic and the reinvention of the sector, and it's amazing to hear how quickly things have moved. So Katie, Brett, and Jake, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks very much, David. Thank you, Katie, and thanks.
This brings the morning session to a close, but we have a really interesting component now. We have a light entertainment for you. As mentioned throughout the first couple of days of the Melbourne EdTech Summit, we've engaged performers who'll be joining us virtually and have had a really difficult time during the pandemic because of the lockdown. And as a result, we've decided to show extra support to our creative peers doing it tough and invite those watching to donate to our support fund. Anything donated will be divided between the 4 performers joining us in the summit. For details, you can donate. There'll be a chat right now on the stage. It'll show you how you can donate. And this session's really exciting. Okay, we have a magic show for you. We still need a virtual audience, so we've got some volunteers. I think they're called volunteers, so we're going to have some volunteers join us. And we've got a very special guest this afternoon, a virtual magic show. Before we officially welcome, here's some things for you to think about. This is a highly interactive virtual magic show, so be prepared to get involved and enhance your virtual magic experience. Trace the Magician is an internationally award-winning magician. She has appeared on multiple TV programs such as Studio 10, Sunrise and 7 ABC News. She's one of Australia's premier musicians, head wizard at the Magic School in Sydney, and one and only Asian female magician in the Southern Hemisphere. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Trace.
Hello, welcome everybody. Am I on?
Thank you. Thank you so very much, and thank you to David, Lisa, Sarah, Grant, and Nathan, who are our fantastic audience. Thank you all for such an entertaining lunch break. So it's been amazing. That concludes our morning here at the third day of the Melbourne EdTech Summit. Thank you for everybody who's logged in and those who have hung around. Just a reminder, if you want to tip any of the performers this week, you can do so through the link that we're going to put up on screen right now, and also in the chat on the platform that you're in. On behalf of the entire EdGrowth ecosystem, I want to thank our principal partners again, Global Victoria and Wand, who along with our summit partners, Amazon Web Services, Cureo and Open Learning, that have provided us support to ensure the program is free for all delegates. This afternoon from 3 o'clock, we have a fantastic program where we re-kick off our conversation of amplifying learner impact with partnerships between institutions and industry, with Ryan O'Hare from Key Path and Dino Willix from University of Queensland. Thank you so very much. See you in a couple of hours' time.